What if the symbol of hope became the king of chaos? What if Izuku Midoriya wielded strings, dominating villains with ruthless precision and a sadistic smile? Welcome to a world where heroism meets tyranny, where mercy is weakness, and where one boy's power reshapes everything. This is Heavenly Yaksha's story.
Welcome, legends, to Chronos Recom. I wrote this story myself, so if you have any suggestions or what-ifs you want to see, drop it in the comments below. Also, just wanted to let you know I've got a Patreon set up now for anyone who wants to support the channel directly. You can get early access to stories, submit direct fan requests, and get exclusive content. It's totally optional, but if you want to help keep these stories coming, check it out. Links in the description. And don't forget to subscribe, like, and hit that bell so you never miss an upload. Let's dive into this story.
The first time Izuku Midoriya made someone bleed with his quirk, he was 7 years old. Most children cried when their powers manifested. They screamed, panicked, or ran to their parents for comfort. Izuku did none of these things. Instead, he stood perfectly still in the playground, watching the thin crimson line appear across the bully's cheek. A cut so precise it looked like it had been drawn with a surgical scalpel. The older boy stumbled backward, hand flying to his face, eyes wide with shock and fear. Around them, the other children went silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Izuku tilted his head, green eyes gleaming with something cold and analytical. Between his fingers, barely visible in the afternoon sunlight, stretched a thread so fine it could cut through steel if pulled taut enough. He flexed his hand, and the string responded like an extension of his will, dancing through the air with lethal grace. Foo-foo-foo-foo-foo. The laugh bubbled up from somewhere deep in his chest, instinctive, natural, as if it had always been there waiting to emerge. How interesting. So this is what power feels like. The bully, Takeshi, who had tormented Izuku for months about being quirkless, scrambled away so fast he tripped over his own feet. The cut wasn't deep, barely more than a scratch, but the message was clear. The dynamic had shifted. The prey had become the predator. Izuku walked home alone that day, fingers trailing invisible strings through the air, mind already cataloging possibilities. While other children his age fantasized about being heroes, Izuku Midoriya was calculating exactly how many pounds of pressure his strings could withstand before snapping, how fast he could weave them into complex patterns, how deeply they could cut into human flesh. His mother found him in his room that evening, surrounded by dozens of strings stretched between furniture, creating a web of such intricate beauty and danger that she gasped. The threads glinted in the lamplight, each one strong enough to slice through the wooden desk they were anchored to. Izuku Inko whispered, one hand over her mouth. Your quirk? It's magnificent, Izuku supplied, not looking away from his creation. He was testing the tensile strength, pulling strings taut and measuring their resistance. Versatile? Deadly? He turned to face her, and for a moment, Inko saw something in her son's eyes that made her blood run cold. I call it string. Rather simple, don't you think? But names are just labels. It's what you do with power that matters. Over the next few years, while his peers attended elementary school and played at being heroes, Izuku devoted himself to understanding every facet of his ability. He discovered he could create strings from any part of his body, fingertips, palms, even from his feet if he concentrated. The threads were invisible to most people, nearly microscopic in diameter, yet stronger than steel cables, but physical experimentation wasn't enough. Izuku devoured information, reading everything he could find about physics, anatomy, engineering, and combat philosophy. He studied the great heroes not with admiration, but with a critical eye, analyzing their weaknesses, identifying the flaws in their techniques, and somewhere in those long nights of study and practice, Izuku Midoriya began to change. It wasn't just his quirk developing. Something fundamental in his personality shifted, as if the power flowing through his fingers had unlocked a part of him that had always existed beneath the surface. The timid, anxious child who once cried over hero videos vanished, replaced by someone else entirely, someone who understood that the world was governed not by justice or morality, but by strength. Someone who realized that those who stood at the top got to define what was right and wrong. Someone who would one day make the world itself dance on his strings. By the time Izuku turned 14, he had developed his quirk to a level that would make professional heroes envious. He could create hundreds of strings simultaneously, control them independently, and manipulate them with such precision that he could perform microsurgery on a living creature. He tested this on injured birds and stray cats, using his strings to repair damaged organs and torn tissue, watching with fascination as his threads wove through flesh like a needle through fabric. But healing held little interest for him. Destruction was so much more. Educational, Izuku's awakening to something beyond his quirk came during a moment of intense focus, when he pushed himself past every limit he thought he had. He'd been training in an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of Musutafu, a place where the homeless sometimes squatted and petty criminals conducted their business. The perfect location for someone who needed privacy and didn't mind a little danger. He was attempting to create a clone, a perfect replica of himself, made entirely from strings. The theory was sound. If he could manipulate threads with such precision, why not weave them into a three-dimensional construct that mimicked his appearance and movements? For hours, he stood in the center of that dusty warehouse, sweat pouring down his face, hands moving in complex patterns as thousands of strings wove together. The strain was immense, like trying to hold up a building with his mind. His vision blurred. His muscles screamed. Every nerve in his body felt like it was on fire, and then something inside him broke through. It started as a sensation in his chest, a pressure building, until it felt like his ribcage might explode. Izuku gasped, falling to one knee, and that's when it happened. The world itself seemed to sharpen around him, every detail becoming impossibly clear. He could sense the rats scurrying in the walls, the pigeons roosting in the rafters, like the heartbeat of a vagrant sleeping in the corner 50 meters away. But more than that, he could feel their intent, their emotions, the very essence of their consciousness. This was something new, something beyond his quirk. When he focused on the vagrant, pushing that strange new awareness outward, the man jerked awake with a strangled cry before his eyes rolled back and he slumped unconscious. Izuku stared at his own trembling hands, mind racing. He'd knocked the man out with nothing but willpower, with the sheer force of his presence. Fu. The laugh came unbidden, echoing through the warehouse. What a wonderful discovery. Over the next 2 years, Izuku trained in secret, developing what he eventually termed haki, a manifestation of willpower and fighting spirit that existed independent of his quirk. He categorized 3 distinct types through painstaking trial and error. The first, observation haki, allowed him to sense the presence of others, predict their movements, and perceive their intentions. With practice, he could dodge attacks before they were even launched, reading the subtle tells in an opponent's muscle tension and breathing. The second, armament haki, hardened his body and his strings, coating them in an invisible armor that made them even more devastating. When he combined armament haki with his string quirk, his threads could cut through solid steel like butter. The third type emerged during a moment of extreme anger, when he'd stumbled upon a group of thugs beating a helpless victim in an alley. The rage that flooded through Izuku was cold and terrible, and when he unleashed it, the thugs simply collapsed like puppets with cut strings. Conqueror's haki, he named it, the ability to dominate the weak-willed through sheer force of presence. None of this made him a hero. Not in the traditional sense. Izuku had no interest in saving people out of some noble sense of justice. He didn't care about protecting the innocent or upholding society's laws. What fascinated him was power itself, the acquisition of it, the application of it, the philosophy behind it. But he needed a stage, a platform from which to operate. And what better place than UA High School, the most prestigious hero academy in Japan? The entrance exam was scheduled for early March, just after Izuku's 15th birthday. He arrived at the massive campus dressed in a pink feathered coat he'd acquired specifically for the occasion. Ostentatious, dramatic, impossible to ignore. Beneath it, he wore dark pants and a purple dress shirt, an outfit that screamed confidence and just a touch of madness. Other examinees stared as he walked past, whispering among themselves about the strange boy who looked like he'd stepped out of a fashion magazine. Izuku ignored them all, sunglasses hiding his eyes, a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. Written exam was a joke. Child's play for someone who'd spent years studying not just hero theory, but combat philosophy, strategic planning, and human psychology. Izuku finished in half the allotted time and spent the rest of the period amusing himself by creating tiny string constructs under his desk, miniature puppets that danced across his palm, visible only to him. The practical exam, however, would be far more interesting. Present Mike's explanation of the test echoed through the massive auditorium. Battle centers filled with robot villains worth different point values. 10 minutes to rack up as many points as possible. Standard hero exam fare. Boring. Predictable. Exactly the kind of straightforward challenge that revealed nothing about a person's true capabilities. But Izuku would make it interesting. He was assigned to Battle Center B, along with roughly 200 other examinees. As they gathered at the starting gate, Izuku took stock of his competition. Most looked nervous, anxious, running through last-minute preparations. A few seemed confident, flexing their quirks in small displays meant to intimidate their peers. One girl caught his attention, invisible, or at least her clothes suggested as much, floating in midair without a body to support them. Interesting. Refraction of light, most likely. Useful for stealth, terrible for direct combat. A boy with a tail stood nearby, looking far too eager. Another had engines in his calves, already revving them in preparation for the starting signal. Basic quirks easily countered. Begin! Present Mike's voice boomed across the facility. The examinees surged forward in a chaotic mass, each desperate to find robots before their competitors. Izuku walked, just walked, hands in his pockets, that same smirk on his face as the crowd rushed past him. Foo-foo-foo-foo-foo, like sheep running to slaughter, he murmured. No strategy, no planning, just blind panic and hope. How disappointing. He turned down a side street away from the main group, and that's when he encountered his first target, a 2-point robot, its mechanical eyes locking onto him as it raised an arm equipped with some kind of bludgeoning weapon. Izuku didn't even break stride. 5 threads, each one coated in armament hockey, shot from his right hand in a spread pattern. The technique had a name, one he'd crafted himself based on the image it created. 5 color strings, he said, almost bored. The strings sliced through the robot like it was made of paper. 5 perfect cuts through both arms, both legs, and straight through its central processor. The machine collapsed in pieces, sparking and dying before it could even complete its attack. 2 points. How utterly pathetic. He continued walking, and the city itself seemed to respond to his presence. More robots appeared, drawn by his leisurely pace, by the easy target he presented. A 3-pointer lunged from an alley, a 2-pointer dropped from a building, a 1-pointer rushed from around a corner. Izuku's fingers moved and strings filled the air. Bullet string. Razor-sharp threads shot out like bullets from a machine gun, each one moving so fast they whistled as they cut through air and metal alike. The robots didn't stand a chance. They fell apart mid-attack, reduced to scrap in seconds. This was almost too easy. Deeper into the battle center, Izuku found clusters of examinees fighting robots in traditional hero fashion, using quirks to smash, blast, and disable their targets. Effective enough, but crude. Lacking in elegance, one boy with a hardening quirk was pummeling a 3-pointer with his fists, each impact denting the metal hull. It would work eventually, but the inefficiency of it made Izuku shake his head. He flicked a finger, and a single string wrapped around the robot's neck joint. One sharp pull, and the head separated from the body. The robot collapsed. The boy spun around, fists raised, looking for his unexpected helper. Izuku was already gone, moving on to more interesting targets. The 10-minute timer was probably half expired when Izuku heard it. A sound like thunder, accompanied by tremors that shook the ground beneath his feet. He turned, sunglasses sliding down his nose, and saw it. The 0-pointer. Massive, imposing, designed to be an obstacle rather than a target. Most examinees were supposed to flee from it. That was the point of the test, after all, teaching young heroes that running away was sometimes the smart choice. But Izuku Midoriya had never been most people. Foo-foo-foo-foo, The laugh built in his chest as he watched the mechanical monstrosity advance down the main street, crushing smaller robots beneath its feet. Now this is more like it. Finally, something that might actually be entertaining. He started walking toward it while everyone else ran away. Screams and shouts filled the air as examinees scattered, desperate to escape the zero-pointer's path. Izuku moved against the tide, his pink coat billowing behind him, face split in a grin that would have made heroes and villains alike nervous. When he was close enough to feel the heat radiating from the robot's engines, close enough to see every rivet and panel in its construction, Izuku stopped. He rolled his shoulders, stretched his neck, and removed his sunglasses with slow, deliberate precision. "I suppose I should thank you," he said, as if the machine could understand him. "This exam was becoming quite boring, but you'll make an excellent demonstration." His fingers moved, and the world filled with strings. They emerged from every part of his body, hands, forearms, even from his shoulders through the coat. Hundreds of them, thousands, each one invisible to the naked eye, but strong enough to support tremendous weight. Izuku directed them upward, toward the buildings on either side of the street. The strings attached to concrete and steel, creating an enormous web that stretched across the entire street. The zero-pointer walked right into it, and Izuku pulled. Spider's web. The giant robot jerked to a halt as if it had run into an invisible wall. Its legs kept trying to move forward, motors straining, but the web of strings held it in place. Izuku could feel the tension in each thread, the immense pressure as the machine fought against his quirk. But it wasn't enough. Not even close. Izuku raised his right hand, and the strings began to glow with a black sheen. Armament hockey coating every single thread, the web tightened, cutting into the zero-pointer's armor, beginning to slice through the reinforced plating. You know what I've learned about power? Izuku's voice carried across the street, reaching the examinees who had stopped fleeing to watch this impossible scene. It's not about being the strongest. It's not about having the flashiest quirk or the most impressive special move. Power is about control, about making the world bend to your will. He clenched his fist, and the strings contracted. The sound was incredible. Metal shrieking as it was torn apart, engines exploding as they were bisected, the massive frame of the zero-pointer groaning as it came apart from the inside out. Izuku's strings cut through every joint, every connection point, every structural support. "It's about standing at the top," Izuku continued, his grin widenings, "and deciding what's right and what's wrong. Villains are evil, heroes are righteous. These terms changed throughout history." The zero-pointer collapsed, not in one piece, but in hundreds. It fell apart like a marionette with cut strings, each component separated cleanly by Izuku's threads. The crash shook the entire battle center, sending up a cloud of dust and debris. Izuku stood at the epicenter, untouched, strings still glowing with hockey as they retracted back into his body. "Those who stand at the top," he finished, his voice dropping to something almost intimate, "determine what's wrong and what's right. This very place we're standing in right now used to be the center of the world, and I will stand at the top." Silence. Complete, total silence from every examinee within viewing distance. They stared at him, this strange boy in a pink coat who had just dismantled a zero-pointer like it was made of tissue paper, with expressions ranging from awe to terror. Izuku put his sunglasses back on. Fu. I believe that's enough entertainment for today." The buzzer signaling the end of the exam felt almost anticlimactic. 3 weeks later, Izuku received his acceptance letter from U.A. He'd scored the highest in Battle Center B by a margin so wide it was almost absurd. Over 200 villain points, plus a significant number of rescue points that the judges awarded for strategic crowd control and minimizing collateral damage during his zero-pointer takedown. The rescue points made him laugh, as if he'd cared about protecting the other examinees. He'd simply wanted to make a statement, to announce his arrival on the stage in a way that couldn't be ignored. Still, the result was the same. He was in .8, Class 1A, naturally. The Hero course, first year, the class that traditionally produced the top students. Exactly where he needed to be. On the first day of school, Izuku arrived deliberately late, not by much, just enough to ensure that everyone else would already be seated, already settled, so that his entrance would command maximum attention. He walked through the door of Class 1A with his pink feathered coat draped over his shoulders like a cape, sunglasses perched on his face despite being indoors, every inch the image of theatrical arrogance. The classroom went quiet. Sitting in the front row was a boy with spiky blonde hair and red eyes that immediately narrowed at Izuku's appearance. Behind him, a girl with brown hair and a bob cut looked up from her conversation. Near the window, a boy with half-white, half-red hair didn't even glance over. Scattered throughout the room were the others. The invisible girl from the entrance exam, the engine-legged boy, a grape-haired pervert staring at the girls, a rock-faced student, a boy with a tail, a girl with earphone jacks, another with a frog quirk, and more. 19 students in total, not counting Izuku. All of them potential future heroes. All of them beneath him. Foo. Izuku let the laugh fill the room as he sauntered to an empty desk near the back. What an interesting collection of faces. I do hope you'll all prove more entertaining than those robots. Who the hell are you supposed to be? The blonde boy, Bakugo, Izuku's mind supplied after a moment, remembering the exam results he'd researched, twisted in his seat to glare. Some kind of fashion disaster. Izuku's grin widened behind his sunglasses. My name is Izuku Midoriya. Remember it well, because soon the entire world will know it. He settled into his chair, draping one leg over the other. As for the coat, it's called style. Perhaps you should try it sometime, though I suspect subtlety isn't your strong suit. Bakugo's hands sparked with small explosions. You little... If you're done posturing, a tired voice interrupted from the doorway. I'd like to start class. Every head turned. Standing in the entrance was a man in a sleeping bag, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. His hair was long and black, his eyes bloodshot, and his entire demeanor screamed exhaustion. I'm Shota Aizawa, your homeroom teacher, he said, somehow shuffling into the room while still inside the sleeping bag. It took you 8 seconds to quiet down. Time is a precious resource. You lot need to learn to be more rational. The class watched in confused silence as their teacher fully entered the room and somehow extracted himself from the sleeping bag in one fluid motion. He was wearing what looked like a black jumpsuit with a weird scarf-like weapon wrapped around his neck. Aizawa's eyes swept across the classroom, pausing briefly on Izuku before moving on. Put these on and meet me outside in 5 minutes, he said, pulling gym uniforms from seemingly nowhere. We're doing a quirk assessment test. Murmurs of surprise and excitement rippled through the class. Aizawa's expression didn't change. U.A. is known for its freestyle educational system that applies to us teachers as well. His grin was sharp and not at all friendly. Softball throw, standing long jump, 50-meter dash, endurance running, grip strength, sustained sideways jumps, upper body exercises, seated toe touch. You did all these in middle school, right? But you weren't allowed to use your quirks. The class was hanging on every word now. The country still hasn't gotten around to standardizing quirk use in physical education curriculum. It's irrational, considering how important quirks are to modern society. Aizawa's eyes glinted with something dangerous. So today you'll be taking these tests again, but this time you can use your quirks however you want. Midoriya, his gaze locked onto Izuku. You scored the highest on the entrance exam. How far could you throw a softball in middle school? Izuku removed his sunglasses, meeting Aizawa's stare with his own. I never participated in physical education. It seemed like a waste of time. Is that so? Aizawa's smile widened. Well, then this will be educational for you. Step into the circle and throw this. He tossed a softball to Izuku. Do whatever you want as long as you stay in the circle. Give it all you've got. The class filed outside, forming a loose group as Izuku walked to the throwing circle. He turned the softball over in his hands, testing its weight, its density, its composition. Standard issue, nothing special. Foo. He laughed softly. All I've got? Very well, sensei. Let me show you what real power looks like. He drew his arm back, and as he did, strings extended from his palm, wrapping around the softball in layers. More strings shot out behind him by his anchoring to the ground, to the building, to every solid surface with 20 meters. They formed a web of tension, like a giant slingshot drawn to its absolute limit. Overheat, Izuku said, and the strings coating the ball turned black with armament haki. He threw. The softball exploded from his hand with a crack like thunder, moving so fast it created a visible shockwave in the air. The web of strings behind him snapped forward, adding their stored tension to the initial throw, multiplying the force exponentially. The ball didn't just fly, it rocketed into the sky like a missile, disappearing from sight in less than a second. Aizawa checked the device in his hand. His eyebrows rose. 3,742 meters, he announced. Gasps and shocked exclamations filled the air. Someone, the invisible girl, let out an actual squeak of disbelief. Even the heterochromatic boy by the window looked vaguely impressed. Izuku walked back to the group, hands in his pockets, that infuriating smirk still on his face. I did mention I scored highest on the entrance exam. Or did you think that was mere luck? Awesome! A boy with red hair and sharp teeth grinned. That was so manly! Damn, Bakugo muttered, explosions popping from his palms. Show off! Now then, Aizawa's voice cut through the chatter. Let's continue with the rest of the tests, but first, a bit of motivation. His grin turned predatory. Whoever scores lowest in the overall rankings will be judged to have no potential and will be expelled immediately. The atmosphere shifted instantly, excitement turning to dread. Several students looked like they might throw up. Izuku's smirk only widened. Foo 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 foo. Now it gets interesting. The tests proceeded one by one, and Izuku dominated each with methodical precision. For the 50-meter dash, he attached strings to the finish line and yanked himself forward, covering the distance in under 2 seconds. For the grip strength test, he reinforced his hand with armament hockey and crushed the device so hard it stopped recording at 900 kilograms. The standing long jump was trivial. Strings to the far marker, pull, land. Endurance running became a joke when he could use aerial movement, attaching strings to clouds and buildings to practically fly around the track. By the time all 8 tests concluded, the results were clear. Izuku Midoriya had placed first in 7 out of 8 categories, losing only the seated toe touch to a girl named Mina Ashido who had some kind of flexibility-enhancing acid quirk. His overall score was so far above second place, held by a girl named Momo Yao Yorozu who could create objects from her body, that it was almost embarrassing for everyone else. Almost. Izuku didn't care about embarrassing them. What he cared about was establishing dominance, making it crystal clear that he operated on a different level than his peers. As Aizawa displayed the final rankings on his phone screen, Izuku caught sight of the last place finisher, a purple-haired boy named Mineta who looked ready to cry. Sensei, Izuku called out, his voice carrying that mocking edge that had become his trademark. About the expulsion, you were lying, weren't you? The class froze. Aizawa's expression didn't change. What makes you say that? Izuku's grin widened. Because expelling someone on the first day before they've had any actual instruction would be irrational. And you strike me as someone who values rationality above all else. He tilted his head. It was a test of character, not ability. You wanted to see who would panic, who would give up, who would push themselves past their limits under pressure. Foo 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 foo. Am I wrong? Aizawa stared at him for a long moment. Then, impossibly, the teacher smiled. That was a rational deduction. He turned to address the entire class. Midoriya's right. The threat of expulsion was a logical ruse to draw out your maximum potential. Nobody's getting expelled today. Relief flooded through the students like a tidal wave. Mineta actually collapsed to his knees. Several others slumped in exhaustion now that the adrenaline was wearing off. Only Izuku remained standing tall, that same smirk on his face. We're done for today, Aizawa said, already climbing back into his sleeping bag. Pick up a syllabus from the classroom. Read it thoroughly. Tomorrow, the real training begins. As the class filed back toward the building, chattering amongst themselves about the insane first day, a voice called out behind Izuku. Midoriya, wait. He turned to find Aizawa watching him with those tired, analytical eyes. Your quirk, the teacher said quietly. String manipulation. But there was something else during those tests, something coating your strings, making them stronger. What was it? Izuku considered lying, considered brushing off the question. But Aizawa was smart. He'd already noticed the discrepancy. Better to give him a partial truth. A technique I developed on my own, Izuku said. I call it armament. It's a manifestation of fighting spirit, a way to harden my strings beyond their normal capabilities. He paused, then added, I have other techniques as well, but I'd prefer to keep them private for now. You understand, I'm sure. A hero needs some secrets. Aizawa studied him for a long moment. The entrance exam footage showed you taking down a zero-pointer. That wasn't just string manipulation and this armament of yours. Fu. No, it wasn't. Izuku met his teacher's gaze steadily. But as I said, Sensei, a hero needs secrets. Perhaps I'll demonstrate more during actual training. Until then, consider me a delightful mystery. He walked away before Aizawa could respond, leaving his teacher standing in the field with a thoughtful expression. The next few weeks at UA fell into a pattern that Izuku found simultaneously entertaining and frustrating. Classes themselves were standard hero curriculum, hero basic training with All Might, who Izuku found disappointingly less impressive in person than his reputation suggested, foundational hero studies with various teachers, and regular academics that bored him to tears, but it was the interpersonal dynamics that proved interesting. Bakugo had developed an immediate, intense rivalry with Izuku that bordered on obsession. Every training exercise became a competition between them, with Bakugo constantly trying to prove he was superior and Izuku casually crushing him every single time. The explosive blonde's frustration was delicious to watch. The heterochromatic boy, Todoroki, kept his distance from everyone, including Izuku, which earned him a modicum of respect. At least he wasn't trying to be friendly or form alliances. The cold indifference was refreshing. A girl named Ochako Uraraka had attempted to befriend Izuku after he'd helped her during the entrance exam, the rescue points the judges mentioned. He'd brushed her off with polite disinterest. He had no need for friends, only people who could be useful. One person who proved surprisingly perceptive was Momo Yaoyorozu, the creation quirk user who'd placed second in the assessment test. She watched Izuku with cautious intelligence, never approaching directly, but clearly analyzing his every move. Then there was Tenya Ida, the engine-legged boy who took everything far too seriously and kept trying to enforce class rules that Izuku blatantly ignored. Their interactions usually ended with Izuku laughing and Ida sputtering in frustration. The most interesting development, however, came during combat training. All Might, symbol of peace, #1 hero, the man who supposedly stood at the pinnacle of hero society, announced a hero versus villain exercise during their second week. Students would be split into teams, with half playing heroes trying to recover a weapon and half playing villains trying to protect it. The teams were decided by lottery. Izuku ended up paired with a tall boy named Mezzo Shoji, who had multiple arms, while Bakugo was partnered with Ida. The matchup was almost too perfect. Bakugo would be salivating at the chance to fight Izuku in a controlled environment. The villain team will have 5 minutes to set up and guard the weapon on the 4th floor. All Might explained, his smile as bright and fake as always. The hero team must either capture the villains with this capture tape or touch the weapon before time runs out. Villains win if they prevent both conditions or capture the heroes first. Izuku and Shoji were designated as the villain team for their match. As they entered the building and made their way to the 4th floor, Izuku could feel Shoji's uncertainty radiating off him. So, what's the plan? Shoji asked, his multiple arms shifting nervously. Izuku didn't answer immediately. He was studying the room, dimensions, structural supports, entry points, windows. His mind cataloged everything, running through scenarios and possibilities. "Tell me," he finally said, "how good are you at following orders without question?" Shoji blinked. "What?" Simple question. Izuku turned to face him, sunglasses glinting in the fluorescent light. "Can you do exactly as I say, even if it seems strange or counterintuitive?" "I mean, I guess, as long as it's not dangerous or..." Fu. "Don't worry, you won't be in any danger. Bakugo's too much of a hero wannabe to seriously hurt a classmate." Izuku's grin widened. "But he's also far too hot-headed to think strategically, which makes this almost too easy." He explained his plan in brief, clipped sentences. Shoji's eyes widened with each instruction, but to his credit, he didn't argue. When the 5 minutes ended and the exercise officially began, Izuku was standing directly in front of the weapon, hands in his pockets, looking utterly relaxed. Shoji had positioned himself near the door, as instructed. It took less than 2 minutes for Bakugo to come charging up the stairs, explosions already firing from his palms. "Midoriya." The blonde's voice echoed through the building. "I'm gonna blast you into next week." He rounded the corner at full speed, Ida trailing behind him looking much more cautious, and launched himself at Izuku with a massive explosion. Izuku didn't move. The explosion engulfed him completely, smoke and force filling the room. Shoji flinched, multiple arms coming up to shield his face from the debris. When the smoke cleared, Izuku was gone. What the? Bakugo spun around, looking for his target. Where'd he go? Above you, Izuku's voice came from the ceiling. Bakugo looked up just in time to see Izuku hanging from strings attached to the rafters, grinning like a madman. Parasite, Izuku said. Invisible strings shot from his fingers too fast for Bakugo to dodge. They wrapped around the explosive boy's arms, legs, torso, completely immobilizing him in midair. Bakugo's eyes went wide as he realized he couldn't move, couldn't activate his quirk, couldn't do anything except dangle like a puppet. You bastard! Let me go! Foo. Now why would I do that? Izuku descended from the ceiling, walking on strings like they were solid ground. You walked right into my trap, blinded by your anger and need to prove yourself. How disappointing. Ida, who'd been hanging back, suddenly burst forward with his engine quirk, moving at incredible speed toward the weapon. Smart. While Izuku was distracted with Bakugo, secure the objective. But Izuku had anticipated this. More strings shot out, creating a web across the entire room in less than a second. Ida ran straight into them at full speed, the nearly invisible threads catching him like a fly in a spider's web. He struggled, engines still firing, but the strings held firm. I expected better from someone who takes heroism so seriously, Izuku said, examining his nails with exaggerated boredom. Did you really think I wouldn't account for both of you? This is cheating, Bakugo roared, still struggling against his strings. Fight me properly, you coward. Izuku's expression darkened. He pulled Bakugo closer with a twitch of his fingers, bringing them face to face. Cheating? His voice dropped to something cold and dangerous. There's no such thing as cheating in a real fight, only winning and losing. Only the strong and the weak. You want to be a hero? Then learn the first rule of combat. Anything goes. He flicked his wrist, and Bakugo slammed into the wall hard enough to crack the concrete. The blonde gasped, the wind knocked out of him. The villain team wins! All Might's voice crackled through the speakers. Time's up, and both heroes are incapacitated. Izuku released his strings, letting Bakugo and Ida drop to the floor. The explosive blonde looked ready to attack again despite the exercise being over, but Ida held him back. As they returned to the observation room where the rest of the class had been watching, Izuku was met with a mixture of expressions. Some students looked impressed. Others seemed disturbed. A few appeared outright scared. All Might's smile was strained as he tried to maintain his usual enthusiastic demeanor. That was quite the decisive victory, young Midoriya. Though perhaps a bit excessive with your classmate? Excessive. Izuku raised an eyebrow. Sensei, if this were a real villain situation, do you think the villain would hold back? Would they care about being excessive or following rules of engagement? He let that sink in for a moment. I treated this exercise exactly how a real villain would, with overwhelming force and zero hesitation. Isn't that the point of these training sessions, to prepare us for reality? All Might opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. Well, yes, but then I'd say I performed perfectly. Izuku's grin was sharp. Foo. Unless, of course, you're suggesting that heroes should hold back and give villains a sporting chance? The symbol of peace looked distinctly uncomfortable, and Izuku savored it. This was the greatest hero in the world, the man who stood at the top of hero society, and he was being made uncomfortable by a first-year student's logic. Delicious. The rest of the combat training exercises proceeded without Izuku's direct involvement, but he watched each match with analytical interest, cataloging the abilities and fighting styles of his classmates. Most were crude, relying on raw power rather than strategy. A few showed potential. Todoroki's ice control was impressive, Yaoyorozu's tactical thinking was solid, and a boy named Tokoyami had a shadow creature that demonstrated interesting properties. But none of them were threats. Not yet, anyway. The real test came 2 weeks later, during what was supposed to be a rescue training exercise at the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, a massive facility designed to simulate various disaster scenarios. The class arrived via bus, chattering excitedly about the upcoming training. Izuku sat alone near the back, watching the urban landscape pass by the window, mind already running through possibilities. Something felt off, a prickling at the back of his neck, like his observation haki was trying to warn him about something. When they entered the USJ, they were greeted by a hero in a spacesuit, 13, the rescue specialist. The facility was enormous, sectioned into different zones representing various disaster scenarios, a flood zone, a landslide zone, a conflagration zone, and more. Welcome to the USJ. 13's voice was warm and enthusiastic. Today we'll be working on rescue operations in various... A dark purple portal opened in the center of the plaza. Everything happened very fast after that. Figures began pouring through the portal, dozens of them, all with hostile intent. Villains, real villains, attacking U.A. His first-year students during a training exercise. Aizawa's capture weapon was already uncoiling from around his neck. 13, protect the students. This is a real attack. The villains spread out, and Izuku's observation haki flared to life, cataloging threats. Most were small-time thugs, hired muscle with weak quirks. But there were a few that stood out. A man made of purple mist who'd created the portal, a figure covered in severed hands scratching at his neck, and something at the center of the plaza that made Izuku's instincts scream Dane-treacher, a creature, massive, muscular, with an exposed brain and a bird-like beak. Power radiated from it like heat from a furnace. Foo, 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 foo. Izuku's laugh cut through the rising panic of his classmates. Now, this is interesting. Midoriya, we need to retreat. Ida was already moving toward the exit, trying to organize an evacuation. Retreat? Izuku stepped forward, shrugging off his pink coat and letting it fall to the ground. His eyes were alight with something wild and hungry. And miss the first real fight I've had since arriving at this school? I think not. Are you insane? Bakugo shouted. These are real villains, not training robots. I'm aware. Izuku cracked his knuckles, strings already extending from his fingertips, which makes this far more entertaining than anything we've done in class. Aizawa was already engaging the thugs, his erasure quirk shutting down their abilities as his capture weapon bound them. He was skilled, efficient, taking down multiple opponents in seconds. But then the hand-covered villain laughed, a horrible scratching sound, and pointed at Aizawa. Nomu. Kill him. The creature moved. It was fast. Impossibly fast for something so large. One moment it was standing in the plaza, the next it was in front of Aizawa, massive fist already swinging. Aizawa barely dodged, but the creature's follow-up was instant. It grabbed the hero's arm and there was a sickening crack of breaking bone. Sensei! Several students shouted. Izuku's eyes narrowed. The creature, Nomu, the villain had called it, was strong. Regeneration 2, based on how its muscles rippled and reformed. Shock absorption, possibly, given how it had tanked Aizawa's elbow strike without flinching. A perfect test subject. Everyone, run for the exit. Izuku commanded, his voice carrying authority that made several students instinctively obey. Ida, use your speed to escape and get help. The rest of you go with 13. What about you? Uraraka's voice was shrill with panic. Izuku's grin widened, and for a moment, every student present felt a chill run down their spine. This wasn't the smirking, arrogant classmate they'd come to know. This was something else, something dangerous. I'm going to have some fun. He walked down the stairs toward the plaza, strings trailing behind him like a cape of invisible death. The thugs noticed him coming, and several moved to intercept. Look, it's just a kid. Easy pickings. Let's show these UA brats what real villains look like. They charged at him in a disorganized mob, quirks activating, weapons brandishing. Izuku didn't slow down. 5 color strings. 10 razor-sharp threads, 5 from each hand, sliced through the air. The thugs didn't even see them coming. Limbs separated from bodies. Weapons clattered to the ground. Screams filled the air as villains collapsed, bleeding but alive. Their combat capabilities completely neutralized. Izuku stepped over them without a glance. More villains came, and more fell. A man with a stretching quirk tried to grab Izuku from behind. Bullet string put half a dozen holes through his torso, careful to miss vital organs. A woman with acidic spit launched projectiles. Strings intercepted each glob mid-air and redirected them back at her, melting through her costume but not her skin. It wasn't even a fight. It was a massacre set to the tune of foo 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 foo. As Izuku laughed his way through the villains like they were made of paper. The hand-covered villain, Tomura Shigaraki, Izuku's observation haki, whispered, picking up the name from the purple mist man's thoughts. Watch this display with growing agitation. Kurogiri, this isn't what we planned. Who is that brat? I don't know, Tomura Shigaraki. He wasn't in the intelligence reports. Shigaraki scratched at his neck harder, flakes of skin falling away. Nomu. Forget the erasure hero. Kill that kid. The Nomu's head swiveled toward Izuku. Then it moved. The speed was incredible, even faster than before. The creature crossed the distance between them in less than a second, fist already swinging with enough force to pulverize concrete. Izuku's observation haki saw it coming. He sidestepped at the last possible moment, the Nomu's fist cratering the ground where he'd been standing. Foo 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 foo. Yes, this is what I wanted. Izuku's grin was manic. Show me what you can do, monster. The Nomu attacked again, a flurry of punches so fast they blurred together. Izuku dodged, weaved, his observation haki reading every movement before it happened. But he wasn't just defending. Strings shot out with each dodge, wrapping around the Nomu's arms, legs, torso. Within seconds, the creature was covered in them, thousands of nearly invisible threads creating a cocoon. Parasite, Izuku said, and pulled. The Nomu froze mid-attack, its body going rigid as Izuku's strings took control of its motor functions. The creature's muscles strained against the foreign control, but the strings held firm, coated in armament haki to resist the Nomu's incredible strength. Incredible, Izuku murmured, actually impressed. Your body is resisting my control. Regeneration is healing the microcuts my strings create as they pierce your flesh. Shock absorption is distributing the pressure of my threads across your entire body. You're a beautiful piece of bioengineering. He clenched his fist and the Nomu's arm raised against its will. But you see, the difference between you and me is simple. Izuku's eyes glowed with something almost feral. I'm not just controlling your body, I'm controlling your nervous system directly, sending signals to your brain that override your natural functions. You're not a monster, you're a puppet. He made the Nomu turn toward the remaining villains, and puppets exist to entertain their master. What followed was a systematic dismantling of the villain attack force. Izuku used the Nomu like a weapon, directing its incredible strength against its own allies. Villains tried to run, but the Nomu was too fast. They tried to fight back, but their quirks were pathetic compared to the creature's raw power. Shigaraki watched his entire operation fall apart, scratching at his neck until blood ran down his throat. This can't be happening. This isn't how it's supposed to go. We're supposed to kill All Might. We're supposed to show the world that heroes can die. Young villains these days, Izuku's voice carried across the plaza, dripping with condescension. So dramatic, so focused on grand statements instead of practical execution. Did you really think attacking a hero school would go smoothly? He directed the Nomu to slam 3 more villains into the ground, their bones cracking audibly. You want to make a statement about heroes? About justice? Izuku's laugh echoed through the USJ. Then let me educate you. Villains are evil? Heroes are righteous? These terms change throughout history. Those who stand at the top determine what's wrong and what's right. He clenched both fists and the Nomu's entire body tensed. Armament, full body coating. The Nomu's skin turned black, Izuku's haki flowing through the strings and coating the creature entirely. Its already incredible strength doubled, tripled. Now then, Izuku's grin was terrifying. Let's see if this facility can withstand a truly motivated Nomu. He made the creature punch the ground. The entire USJ shook. Massive cracks spider-webbed across the plaza floor, chunks of concrete flying through the air. The landslide zone actually began landsliding, the carefully constructed disaster simulation becoming a real disaster. Shigaraki stumbled backward, Kurogiri barely catching him with a portal before debris could crush them both. Fall back! The hand-covered villain's voice was high and panicked. Retreat! Kurogiri, get us out of here! But the plan is fucked. That kid is a monster! Purple portals began opening around the remaining conscious villains, pulling them to safety. Within seconds, the USJ was clearing out, enemies fleeing for their lives. Izuku considered pursuing them. It would be easy, attach strings to Kurogiri, disrupt his quirk, trap them all here for the heroes to arrest. But that seemed boring, predictable, better to let them escape. Let them tell stories about the first-year student who single-handedly destroyed their operation. Let the fear spread through the villain underworld like a disease. Foo 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 foo. Run, little villains. Tell everyone you meet about the day you attacked U.A and met Izuku Midoriya. His voice carried through the facility, reaching the fleeing criminals. Tell them that a new power is rising. Tell them that the old order is about to change. The last portal closed, leaving only Izuku and the Nomu standing in the devastated plaza. He released his control, and the creature collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. Alive but unconscious, its brain overwhelmed by the conflicting signals Izuku had been forcing through its nervous system. Footsteps on the stairs drew his attention. The other students were returning, led by Ida and followed by additional heroes. All Might among them, the symbol of peace, looking ready for battle. They stopped dead when they saw the scene. The plaza was destroyed. Dozens of villains lay unconscious or incapacitated across the floor, some of them missing limbs, others groaning in pain. The massive Nomu creature was face down in a crater of its own making, and standing at the center of it all, untouched and smiling, was Izuku Midoriya. Young Midoriya! All Might's voice boomed across the space. What happened here? Izuku bent down, picked up his pink coat from where he dropped it, and shrugged it back on. Villains attacked. I defended myself and my classmates, quite thoroughly, as you can see. Did you do all this? 13's voice was barely a whisper. Foo 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 foo. Is that so surprising, Sensei? Izuku adjusted his sunglasses, his grin never faltering. I am the student who scored highest on the entrance exam, after all. Did you think that was just for show? All Might moved forward, his experienced eyes cataloging the damage, the positioning of the bodies, the unconscious Nomu. This creature was designed to kill me. We have intelligence suggesting it's as strong as I am, with multiple quirks and regeneration. Was designed to kill you, Izuku corrected. Past tense. Now it's just an expensive biological weapon in need of serious repairs. I made sure to damage its brain enough that it won't be waking up for quite some time. How? Aizawa's voice was rough with pain, one arm hanging at an awkward angle but his eyes still sharp. How did you defeat something like that alone? Izuku met his teacher's gaze. I told you, Sensei. I have techniques you haven't seen yet. That armament ability I mentioned, it's just one of several. Would you like a full demonstration, or should we perhaps focus on getting medical attention for the injured? The question hung in the air for a moment before All Might shook his head. Medical attention first, but young Midoriya, we will be having a conversation about this, a very detailed conversation. I look forward to it. Izuku's smile was all teeth. Foo 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 foo. Though I suspect I'll be doing most of the talking. As the heroes began organizing rescue and medical operations, as paramedics arrived to tend to the wounded villains and the injured Aizawa, as police swarmed the facility to process the crime scene, Izuku stood apart from it all. Several of his classmates were staring at him, some with awe, some with fear, all with a new understanding of exactly who Izuku Midoriya was. Not just another student, not just someone with a powerful quirk, something else entirely. Something that defied their understanding of what a hero should be. Bakugo's hands trembled with barely suppressed rage and what might have been fear. Todoroki's heterochromatic eyes were calculating, reassessing. Yaoyorozu looked troubled, like she was trying to solve an equation that didn't add up. Only one person approached him directly. Uraraka, the gravity girl, her brown eyes wide and uncertain. Midoriya, those villains. You hurt them really badly. Some of them might not ever recover full use of their limbs. I'm aware, Izuku said calmly. But isn't that too much? I mean, they were attacking us, yeah, but heroes are supposed to use minimum necessary force, right? Capture and restrain, not maim? Izuku looked at her for a long moment, and something in his gaze made her take an instinctive step back. Tell me, Uraraka, what would you have done if one of those villains had grabbed you? If they'd gotten past Aizawa and 13, what would you have done to protect yourself and your classmates? I would have used my quirk to what? Make them float? Then what? They're still capable of attacking, still capable of hurting people. You'd just be delaying the inevitable. Izuku's voice was patient, almost kind, which somehow made it worse. I eliminated the threat completely. Every villain lying on that floor is alive, which is more mercy than they would have shown us. But they're also incapable of fighting back, incapable of causing further harm. He leaned in slightly, his voice dropping. Heroes play by rules that villains ignore. They fight with one hand tied behind their back, hoping their quirks and training are enough to compensate. And sometimes that's enough. But when it's not, when the villains are stronger, more ruthless, more willing to do whatever it takes to win, his grin was sharp. That's when the heroes die. Uraraka opened her mouth, closed it, then tried again. But All Might always. All Might is an exception, not the rule. He's strong enough that he can afford to hold back, to follow the rules, to be the shining symbol everyone needs him to be. Izuku straightened, adjusting his coat. But I'm not All Might, I'm something else entirely. Something this world is going to need, whether it realizes it or not. He walked away, leaving Uraraka standing there with a troubled expression. The aftermath of the USJ incident was complicated. Police wanted statements from everyone present. Heroes wanted to understand exactly what happened. The school wanted to ensure students' safety while managing the PR disaster of villains penetrating their security, and everyone, absolutely everyone, wanted to know more about Izuku Midoriya. The interrogation room was small and sterile, with a one-way mirror along one wall. Sitting across from Izuku were Detective Naomasa Tsukauchi and Principal Nezu, the latter being an unusual sight, a small white creature that looked like a cross between a mouse, a dog, and a bear. "Thank you for meeting with us, Midoriya," Tsukauchi began, his voice professional and calm. He had a truth detection quirk, Izuku knew. "Interesting. We just have a few questions about the incident at the USJ." "Of course, Detective, I'm happy to cooperate." Izuku's smile was pleasant, giving away nothing. Nezu sipped tea from a comically small cup, his eyes bright with intelligence. "Let's start simply. In your own words, what happened after the villains appeared?" Izuku recounted the events with clinical precision, leaving out only the specific mechanics of his haki. He described using his string quirk to incapacitate villains, taking control of the Nomu creature, and systematically eliminating the threat. All true, all verifiable, all carefully worded to avoid revealing too much. Tsukauchi's quirk would detect lies, but Izuku wasn't lying. He was simply being selective with his truths. "This Nomu creature," Nezu interrupted, "you stated it had multiple quirks? Regeneration, strength enhancement, shock absorption?" "Correct, Principal. It was clearly designed as an anti-All Might weapon, though its creators vastly underestimated what would be required to actually defeat the symbol of peace. And yet you defeated it. Alone. As a first-year student." "I controlled it," Izuku corrected. "There's a difference. I used its own strength against the other villain's spike, then overloaded its nervous system to render it unconscious. If it had been designed to resist my specific quirk, the outcome might have been different." Nezu's smile was sharp. "Your string quirk is quite versatile, creating nearly invisible, razor-sharp threads, strong enough to lift and control a creature that weighs several hundred kilograms, precise enough to manipulate its motor functions directly. That's far beyond typical string manipulation quirks we have on record." "I've trained extensively," Izuku said. "Since my quirk manifested when I was 7, I've dedicated myself to understanding and developing it fully. Is that so unusual?" "Not unusual, no, but combined with this armament technique you mentioned to Aizawa." Nezu trailed off, waiting. Izuku knew this was the crux of the matter. How much would he reveal about haki? "It's a self-developed enhancement technique," he said carefully. "A manifestation of fighting spirit that allows me to harden my strings and, with sufficient focus, my body. I discovered it through intense training and meditation. As far as I know, I'm the only person with this ability." Tsukauchi's quirk pinged truth. Nezu's eyes gleamed. "Remarkable. And you developed this entirely on your own?" "I had no teacher, if that's what you're asking. No mentor, no guide. Just determination and thousands of hours of practice." All true. The questioning continued for another hour, covering every aspect of the attack. Izuku answered each question with the same careful precision, revealing just enough to satisfy their curiosity while maintaining his secrets. Finally, Nezu set down his teacup and smiled. "One last question, Midoriya. Those villains you injured, several will have permanent disabilities as a result of your actions. Some have lost use of limbs, others have nerve damage that may never fully heal. Do you feel any remorse for this?" The room went very quiet. Izuku met Nezu's gaze steadily. "No." Tsukauchi's quirk confirmed it. Truth. "They attacked a school full of children with lethal intent," Izuku continued. They brought a biological weapon designed to kill the symbol of peace. They were willing to murder every student and teacher present to make a statement about hero society. His voice was calm, almost conversational. I stopped them in the most efficient way possible. If that resulted in permanent injury, well, that's a consequence of their own actions. They chose to be villains. I simply chose to be better at violence than they were. Nezu studied him for a long moment. You don't think like a typical hero student. No, Izuku agreed. I don't. And perhaps that's what this world needs. Heroes who are willing to do what's necessary rather than what's comfortable. The principal's smile widened. Fascinating. Thank you for your time, Midoriya. You may return to class. As Izuku stood to leave, Nezu added, Oh, and Midoriya? We'll be watching your development with great interest. You have the potential to become either the greatest hero this country has ever seen, or its greatest villain. I sincerely hope it's the former. Izuku paused at the door, looking back over his shoulder. Fu. Villains are evil? Heroes are righteous? These terms change throughout history, Principal Nezu. Those who stand at the top determine what's wrong and what's right. He adjusted his sunglasses. And I intend to stand very, very high. He left the two officials sitting in silence, their expressions thoughtful and more than a little concerned. News of the USJ incident spread through UA like wildfire, and from there to the wider world. The media descended on the school in a frenzy. Security breached, students attacked, a first-year student single-handedly defeating an anti-All Might bioweapon. It was the kind of story that sold millions of newspapers and generated endless debate on talk shows. Izuku's name became famous overnight. Headlines screamed, "The Heavenly Student, First Year Defeats Villain Army, and New Hero Prodigy Emerges from USJ Attack." And Is Izuku Midoriya too dangerous for hero school? The last one came from a more critical publication, one that had interviewed several of the injured villains after their arrests. The article described his methods as excessive, brutal, and unsuitable for a hero. It quoted a villain who'd lost the use of his left arm. He was smiling the whole time, laughing, like it was all a game to him. Izuku read that article 3 times, his grin widening with each pass. Perfect. Let them be afraid. Let the villains whisper his name in their hideouts and feel their blood run cold. Fear was a tool, and he wielded it as skillfully as his strings. Class 1A's dynamics shifted dramatically after the USJ. Students who'd been friendly or neutral toward Izuku became wary, giving him space, avoiding direct eye contact. The violence he'd displayed, the casual way he'd maimed criminals, it fundamentally changed how they saw him. A few sought him out anyway. Bakugo cornered him after class one day, explosions popping in his palms. The USJ. You could have used those techniques during our combat training. You could have destroyed me from the start. Yes, Izuku agreed. I could have. Then why didn't you? Izuku's smile was condescending. Because you weren't worth the effort. Those villains, they were actually trying to kill people. You were just playing hero in a training exercise. There's a difference between a real threat and a barking dog. Bakugo's face went through several shades of red before he turned and stormed off, explosions echoing in his wake. Todoroki's approach was more measured. He waited until they were alone in the classroom during lunch, most students having left for the cafeteria. Your quirk, he said without preamble. It's not just string manipulation. Isn't it? Izuku replied, not looking up from the book he was reading, a historical text about vigilante justice in early quirk society. The hardening effect, the way you sensed the Nomu's movements before it attacked. There's something else. Todoroki's eyes were analytical, something you're not sharing with the school. Izuku finally looked up, his expression neutral. And if there is, what would you do with that information? Nothing. I don't care about UA's politics or Hero Society's rules. Todoroki's voice was flat. I just want to understand what I'm dealing with. You're dangerous. More dangerous than anyone else in this class, maybe even more than most pro-heroes. Fu. Is that concern I hear, Todoroki? How touching. It's assessment. You operate outside normal parameters. That makes you unpredictable, which makes you a potential threat. Izuku closed his book, giving Todoroki his full attention. Let me tell you something about threats. Everyone in this school, students, teachers, even All Might himself, operates under the assumption that Hero Society's rules are absolute. that there are lines you don't cross, methods you don't use, actions that are unheroic. He stood, moving closer to Todoroki. But those rules only exist because the people at the top decided they should. And the people at the top only got there because they were strong enough to enforce their vision. He paused, letting that sink in. I'm going to be stronger than all of them. Strong enough that I get to decide what the rules are. Strong enough that words like hero and villain mean whatever I want them to mean. His smile was sharp. So yes, Todoroki, I'm dangerous, but I'm not your enemy, not unless you make me one. Todoroki held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded once. Understood. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I respect strength, and you're strong. Just don't let that strength consume you. After he left, Izuku laughed softly to himself. Consume me? My dear Todoroki, the strength is me. It always has been. The weeks following the USJ brought increased security to UA, additional hero patrols around the campus, and a general atmosphere of tension. The sports festival, normally held at this point in the school year, was delayed while administrators debated whether it was safe to proceed. Eventually, they decided to continue. The sports festival was too important, too integral to Hero Society to cancel. It would proceed as planned, albeit with enhanced security measures. Izuku welcomed the news. The sports festival would be the perfect stage for his next demonstration, a chance to show the entire world exactly what Izuku Midoriya was capable of. All Might pulled him aside one afternoon, his ever-present smile strained. Young Midoriya, may I have a word? They walked to an empty classroom, All Might closing the door behind them. For a moment, the symbol of peace just studied him, and Izuku wondered if this was when the confrontation would finally happen. The USJ incident, All Might began. You saved many lives that day. Students, teachers, even villains. You kept the death toll at 0 despite overwhelming odds. But, Izuku prompted, but your methods concern me. All Might's voice was gentle, which somehow made it worse. A hero's duty is to protect and inspire, to show people that there's always hope, always a better way, what you did to those villains. I neutralized threats to myself and my classmates, Izuku said flatly. Would you prefer I let them continue their attack? Let them potentially kill someone? Of course not. But there are ways to stop criminals without causing permanent injury. Without what? Without being efficient? Without ensuring they can't attack again? Izuku's voice was sharp now. Tell me, All Might, how many villains have you fought who you chose not to seriously injure, only to have them return later to hurt more people? All Might opened his mouth, closed it. Exactly. Izuku's smile was cold. You're strong enough that you can afford to pull your punches, to give criminals second and third chances. But most heroes aren't you. Most heroes die when they show mercy to people who don't deserve it. That's a dark philosophy for someone so young. It's a realistic philosophy for someone who understands how the world actually works. Izuku adjusted his sunglasses. You stand at the top, All Might. You're the symbol of peace, the greatest hero alive. And because you stand at the top, you get to define what heroism means. But what happens when you're gone? When that symbol crumbles? Will your philosophy of mercy and hope be enough to stop the villains who've been waiting for their chance? All Might's expression was pained. You sound like you're preparing for my retirement. I'm preparing for reality, Izuku corrected. Everything ends eventually. Even symbols, especially symbols. And when yours ends, this world will need heroes who are willing to do more than inspire. It will need heroes who are willing to dominate. He walked toward the door, pausing with his hand on the handle. Thank you for the conversation, All Might. I genuinely do appreciate your concern, but I'm not going to change who I am to fit your image of what a hero should be. I'm going to be exactly what I know this world needs. Someone strong enough to stand at the top and make the hard choices everyone else is too weak to make. He left All Might standing alone in that empty classroom, the greatest hero in the world looking suddenly very tired. The UA Sports Festival arrived on a brilliant spring day, the massive stadium filled to capacity with screaming fans. Cameras were positioned at every angle, broadcasting to millions of viewers across the country and around the world. This was the biggest stage in Hero Society for students, the event that could make or break a hero's career before it even started. Pro heroes from every agency attended specifically to scout talent to identify the next generation of sidekicks and future partners. Class 1A waited in the prep area beneath the stadium, the energy palpable. Some students looked nervous, others excited, a few grimly determined. Izuku stood apart from them all, wearing his pink feathered coat despite the warm weather, sunglasses firmly in place. He could feel the weight of countless eyes on him, even through the walls, the entire country watching, waiting to see what the heavenly student would do. Fu. Time to give them a show they'll never forget. The first event was announced, a multi-kilometer obstacle course race through UA's massive training grounds. All Hero Course students, both Class 1A and 1B, would compete simultaneously, with the top finishers advancing to the next round. Begin. The starting gate opened and chaos erupted. Hundreds of students surged forward, trying to squeeze through the narrow corridor. Bodies pressed together, quirks activating, everyone desperate to get ahead. Izuku didn't even try to push through the crowd. Instead, he looked up. Strings shot from his hands to the ceiling, and he pulled himself up and over the mass of students in one smooth motion. Before anyone could react, he was running along the walls, using his threads to maintain his position, moving faster than anyone trying to navigate the crowd below. Incredible! Present Mike's voice boomed through the stadium. Izuku Midoriya takes an early lead with some amazing string manipulation. The corridor opened into a larger space filled with enormous robots, the same zero-pointers from the entrance exam, positioned as obstacles. Students scattered, trying to find ways around the mechanical giants. Several began attacking, using their quirks to disable or destroy the robots. Izuku just smiled. Parasite. Strings shot out to the nearest zero-pointer, wrapping around its mechanical components, infiltrating its control systems. The robot jerked, its movements becoming stilted, and then it turned toward the other zero-pointers and began attacking them. More strings, more robots converted to his control. Within 30 seconds, all the zero-pointers in the area were fighting each other, clearing a path straight through the obstacle. Izuku walked past the mechanical carnage, not even glancing back at the students struggling to keep up. What incredible strategy! Present Mick was practically screaming. Midoriya's taken control of the robots. He's not just winning, he's dominating. The next obstacle was a massive pit filled with tight ropes stretched across 100-meter drops. Most students would have to carefully balance their way across, risking a fall that, while not lethal thanks to safety measures, would cost precious time. Izuku attached strings to the far side of the pit and launched himself into the air, using the threads like a zipline. He flew across the gap in seconds, landing lightly on the other side. Third obstacle, a minefield. Explosive devices buried in the ground, designed to go off with enough force to disable but not seriously injure. Students would have to either carefully navigate around them or use their quirks to clear a path. Izuku's observaki flared to life, sensing the exact position of every single mine in the field. He walked forward at a casual pace, his path weaving between explosives with perfect precision, never once getting close enough to trigger any of them. To the viewers, it looked like he was just taking a leisurely stroll through what should be a treacherous obstacle. In reality, his haki was reading the electromagnetic signatures of each device, his mind processing the information faster than most people could think. Unbelievable. Midoriya hasn't slowed down once. He's making this look easy. As he approached the finish line, Izuku could hear the crowd's roar, feel the weight of their attention. This was the moment. This was when he would make his statement. He crossed the finish line a full minute ahead of the second-place finisher, Todoroki, who'd frozen a path through the minefield with his ice. The stadium erupted in cheers and applause, but Izuku barely noticed. He was looking up at the cameras, knowing that millions of people were watching. Fu, he laughed, the sound carrying through the speakers. That was a nice warm-up, but the real entertainment hasn't even started yet. The second event was announced, a cavalry battle. Teams of 4 students would form horses with one rider, wearing headbands worth different point values based on their performance in the obstacle race. The goal was to steal other teams' headbands while protecting your own, with the top teams advancing to the final event. Izuku's first-place finish in the race meant his headband was worth 10 million points, effectively making him the primary target for every other team. Perfect. Fu. Come then, he said, adjusting his sunglasses as the other students began forming teams. Show me if any of you are worth my time. He didn't even bother recruiting teammates. Instead, he stood alone in the center of the arena, waiting. Midoriya. Several students called out, wanting to join his team. After all, he'd dominated the first event. Being on his team would guarantee advancement, but Izuku waved them off. I won't need a team. What? Uraraka's voice. But it's a team battle. You have to have 3 other people. Do I? Izuku's grin widened. Let me check the rules. He pulled out the event guidelines, reading through them with exaggerated care. Here it is. Teams must consist of 2 to 4 members. Not exactly 4. 2 to 4. Present Mike's voice crackled through the speakers. That's correct, though most students form teams of 4 for strategic advantage. Fu. Most students aren't me. The 15-minute team formation period ended, and Izuku stood alone while everyone else had formed groups of 4. Every single team was positioned around him in a loose circle, all eyes on the 10 million point headband tied around his forehead. Begin. Every team charged at once. Izuku didn't move, didn't even raise his hands. Spider's web, he said calmly. Strings erupted from his body in every direction, creating a massive web that filled the entire arena. Teams ran straight into the nearly invisible threads, getting tangled, trapped, lifted off their feet as Izuku's quirk caught them like flies. What the? I can't move. He's got us all. Izuku started walking, his web of strings moving with him, carrying trapped teams through the air. He plucked headbands from their foreheads with casual precision, accumulating points while his opponents struggled helplessly. Is this even legal? Present Mike sounded genuinely unsure. He's not violating any rules. Aizawa's voice joined the commentary, dry and analytical. The event said to steal headbands and avoid having yours stolen. Midoriya is doing both perfectly. But he's trapped everyone. Again, not against the rules. Unconventional? Absolutely. Effective? Undeniably. Team after team fell to Izuku's web. He moved through the arena like a spider, his strings catching and controlling anyone who came close. Some students tried to use their quirks to escape, blasts of ice, explosions, acid, but Izuku's observation haki let him predict and counter every attempt. One team showed actual promise. Todoroki's group, which included Yaoyorozu, a boy named Denki Kaminari, and Ida. They'd created a strategy specifically to counter Izuku, using Todoroki's ice to freeze his strings, while Yaoyorozu created insulated materials to prevent direct contact. Interesting. Fu. Finally, someone with a brain. Izuku directed his full attention toward them. The battle that followed was the most engaging part of the entire event. Todoroki launched walls of ice, trying to trap Izuku in frozen barriers. Yaoyorozu created steel sheets to block his strings. Kaminari released electricity to disrupt his control. Ida used his speed to dart in and attempt to grab the 10 million point headband, but they were still too slow. Izuku's strings caught Kaminari first, lifting him away from the team and leaving them vulnerable. Yaoyorozu tried to compensate by creating a net, but Izuku cut through it with armament-coated threads. Todoroki's ice met the same fate, sliced into chunks before it could fully form. That left Ida, who activated his Recipro Burst, a speed technique that put tremendous strain on his engines, but made him incredibly fast for short periods. He nearly made it. His hand actually touched the edge of Izuku's headband before strings wrapped around his wrist and yanked him backward. Close, Izuku said, his voice carrying genuine respect. You almost succeeded. That speed technique is impressive, Ida, but almost isn't enough. He plucked the headbands from all 4 team members, adding their points to his collection. By the time the 15-minute battle period ended, Izuku had accumulated so many points that the final tally was almost comical. He'd stolen headbands from literally every other team, leaving them all at 0 while he sat comfortably at over 15 million points. The qualifying teams for the final event were announced. Izuku Midoriya in first place, obviously, Todoroki's team in second. They'd managed to steal a few headbands from other teams before Izuku got to them. Bakugo's team in third, and a team from Class 1B led by a girl named Itsuka Kendo in fourth. But everyone knew the real story. Izuku had dominated so completely that the other placements felt like consolation prizes. The final event was a tournament, one-on-one battles broadcast to the entire nation, the ultimate showcase of individual skill and power. The brackets were announced, and Izuku found himself in the same quarter as a purple-haired student from General Studies named Hitoshi Shinso. The boy had a brainwashing quirk, apparently, answer his questions and fall under his control, dangerous against most opponents, utterly useless against Izuku. They faced off in the arena, the crowd's anticipation palpable. Izuku Midoriya, Shinso's voice was tired, almost bored. Everyone says you're some kind of genius, a prodigy, but you're just another privileged kid with a strong quirk, aren't you? He was trying to bait a response, trigger his brainwashing. Clever, but transparent. Izuku didn't speak. He just smiled, raised one hand, and flicked his fingers. 5 color strings. The threads moved faster than Shinso could react, wrapping around his arms, legs, torso. Within 2 seconds, the General Studies student was completely immobilized, lifted off the ground, unable to speak or move. A bold strategy, Izuku said conversationally, trying to use verbal provocation against someone who can simply choose not to engage. But you made a fundamental mistake. You assumed I would play your game instead of my own. He walked Shinso to the edge of the ring, using his strings as a puppeteer would control a marionette, then unceremoniously dumped him over the boundary line. Hitoshi Shinso is out of bounds. Izuku Midoriya advances to the next round. The match had lasted less than 10 seconds. His next opponent was Mei Hatsume from the support course, a girl with gadgets and inventions who used the match as an advertisement opportunity rather than actually trying to win. Izuku let her demonstrate a few of her creations. They were actually quite innovative before politely defeating her. The quarterfinals put him against Ida, who came at him with everything he had. The speed was impressive, genuinely challenging to track even with observation hockey. But speed alone wasn't enough against someone who could predict movements before they happened. Izuku caught Ida mid-charge with parasite strings, taking control of his motor functions and walking him out of the ring. The semifinals were where things got truly interesting. Katsuki Bakugo stood across from him, explosions already crackling around his hands, red eyes blazing with determination and rage. "No more holding back," Bakugo growled. "I'm going to beat you into the ground, Midoriya. I'm going to prove I'm stronger than you, stronger than everyone, and become the #1 hero." Izuku's response was to laugh, that signature fu-fu-fu-fu that had become so recognizable. "#1 hero? Bakugo, you still don't understand." He removed his sunglasses, meeting Bakugo's glare with his own cold stare. This isn't about being a hero. It's about power, about standing at the top and deciding what heroes even mean. "Shut up and fight!" Bakugo launched himself forward with explosive propulsion, hands already firing. The blasts were powerful, well-aimed, coming from multiple angles. Against most opponents, the barrage would be overwhelming. Against Izuku, it was predictable. His observation hockey tracked every movement, every explosion. Strings wove through the air, creating barriers that redirected blast waves, caught Bakugo mid-flight, disrupted his trajectory. "You're strong," Izuku acknowledged, dodging another explosion by millimeters. "Stronger than most of our classmates. Your combat instincts are excellent, your power substantial, but you fight with anger, not strategy, emotion, not calculation." "I said shut up!" A particularly massive explosion, close range, designed to eliminate Izuku in one hit. "Armament, full body," Izuku said quietly, his skin turned black, hockey coating his entire body. The explosion hit him directly, smoke and heat engulfing the arena. When the smoke cleared, Izuku stood untouched, not a scratch on him. Bakugo's eyes went wide. "My turn," Izuku said and moved. Bullet string. Hundreds of hockey-coated threads shot toward Bakugo like a machine gun firing. The blonde tried to dodge, but there were too many, coming too fast. They wrapped around him, binding his arms to his sides, preventing him from creating more explosions. Parasite. Izuku took control, making Bakugo's own body walk him to the edge of the ring. The explosive boy fought against it, muscles straining, face contorted with rage and humiliation, but the strings were too strong, the control too complete. "This is the difference between us," Izuku said, his voice carrying through the silent stadium. "You have power, I have dominance. You can destroy, I can control. You want to be number one, I'm going to be the only one who matters. Bakugo's foot crossed the boundary line. Katsuki Bakugo is out of bounds. Izuku Midoriya advances to the finals. The stadium erupted in mixed reactions. Cheers and applause from those impressed by the display, concerned murmurs from those disturbed by how thoroughly Izuku had dominated. Izuku released his control, and Bakugo collapsed to his knees, fists slamming into the ground hard enough to crack it. "I'll beat you," Bakugo whispered, voice raw. "I swear I'll beat you." Fu. I look forward to you trying. The other semifinal was between Todoroki and Tokoyami, and it was disappointing. Todoroki won easily, his ice overwhelming Tokoyami's dark shadow quirk, which meant the finals would be Izuku versus Todoroki. Perfect. They stood on opposite ends of the arena, the entire stadium holding its breath. Todoroki's left side was already coating in ice, his right side remaining deliberately unused. The boy had some psychological issue about his fire quirk, something involving his father Endeavor, but Izuku didn't particularly care about his classmates' trauma. "Begin!" Present Mike's voice echoed. Todoroki didn't waste time. Massive walls of ice erupted from the ground, racing toward Izuku with enough force to freeze him solid. Overheat. A thick, hockey-coated string whip extended from Izuku's hand, moving so fast it whistled through the air. It cut through the ice like it was made of sugar glass, shattering Todoroki's attack before it could reach him. More ice, larger, faster. Todoroki was pushing his quirk to its limits, creating glacial structures that would be impressive against most opponents. Izuku shattered them all. "God thread," he said, and strings erupted from the ground around Todoroki, thick, powerful threads coated in armament haki. They wrapped around his opponent's legs, restricting movement. Todoroki froze them, but more strings emerged. For every thread he destroyed, 2 more appeared. "You're holding back," Izuku called out, advancing slowly. "That fire quirk you refuse to use. Why?" "It's none of your business." Todoroki's voice was sharp. Fu. Perhaps not, but I'll tell you something anyway." Izuku's strings continued their assault, relentless and overwhelming. Power is power, regardless of its source. Refusing to use half your quirk because of some emotional baggage is just weakness wearing a philosophical mask. "You don't understand. I understand that you're going to lose this match because you're too stubborn to use everything you have." Izuku's grin widened. "I understand that you value your pride over victory, and I understand that such thinking will never allow you to stand at the top." More strings, more ice, the battle escalating. Todoroki was strong, incredibly strong, but he was literally fighting with one arm tied behind his back. And Izuku was merciless, break white. 16 massive string waves erupted from the ground in a circle around Todoroki, each one coated in armament haki, each one moving with devastating force. They crashed inward simultaneously, a prison of razor-sharp threads closing in from all directions. Todoroki tried to freeze them all, his ice quirk working overtime, but there were too many coming too fast. The strings broke through his defenses, wrapping around him, lifting him off the ground. "I could end this now," Izuku said, his voice carrying across the arena. "I could walk you out of bounds like I did to Bakugo, but that would be boring, wouldn't it? Anticlimactic." He tightened the strings just enough to make Todoroki gasp. "So instead, I'll give you a choice. Use your fire. Show me your full power. Fight me with everything you have." His eyes gleamed behind his sunglasses. "Or surrender now and admit that you're too weak to overcome your own limitations." The stadium was silent, everyone waiting for Todoroki's response. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, flames began to flicker on Todoroki's left side. "That's it," Izuku encouraged, his grin widening. "Show me what you can really do." The flames exploded outward with tremendous force, burning through Izuku's strings, melting the ice around Todoroki. For the first time in the match, the heterochromatic boy was using both sides of his quirk simultaneously. The heat was incredible, the power undeniable, and Izuku laughed with pure joy. "Yes! This is what I wanted. This is the kind of opponent worth fighting. Fire and ice, working in harmony, creating attacks that would challenge even pro heroes." Todoroki had been holding back so much power, and now that it was unleashed, the match became something spectacular. But spectacular didn't mean sufficient. Izuku's observation haki tracked every attack before it landed. His armament haki protected him from the flames and ice that got too close, and his strings, his beautiful, versatile strings, adapted to every new strategy Todoroki employed. When fire came, strings coated in armament haki cut through it. When ice formed, the same strings shattered it. When Todoroki tried to combine both elements in complex attacks, Izuku's observation haki predicted the patterns and countered them before they could fully form. It was beautiful. It was art. It was complete and total dominance wrapped in the aesthetic of a real fight. Flap thread, Izuku said, and strings shot up from the ground beneath Todoroki like bullets, disrupting his footing, destroying his balance. The heterochromatic boy stumbled, his concentration breaking, and that was all Izuku needed. Parasite. The strings wrapped around Todoroki again, but this time they were coated in armament haki, strong enough to resist both fire and ice. They infiltrated his nervous system, took control of his motor functions. Izuku made Todoroki raise his own hand in surrender. The stadium went completely silent. The winner of the U.A. Sports Festival, Present Mike's voice was subdued, almost reverent, Izuku Midoriya. Izuku released his control, and Todoroki collapsed to his knees, breathing hard, left side still smoking with residual flames. "Thank you," Izuku said quietly, so only Todoroki could hear. "That was the most entertaining match I've had since entering U.A. You pushed me further than anyone else has. That's worth respect." He extended a hand to help Todoroki up. The boys stared at it for a moment, then accepted. As they walked off the arena floor together, the crowd finally found its voice. Applause, cheers, some boos from those who found Izuku's methods too harsh. It all blended together into a cacophony of noise. But Izuku heard none of it. He was too busy thinking about what came next, about the offers that would flood in from hero agencies, about how he would use this platform to continue his rise. The award ceremony was almost anticlimactic. All Might presented the medals personally, his smile as bright as ever, but his eyes troubled when they met Izuku's. "Young Midoriya," the symbol of peace said as he placed the gold medal around his neck, "you've shown remarkable skill today. The world is watching you now. What you do with that attention will define your future." "I know," Izuku replied. Fu, and I intend to make it a future they'll never forget." As he stood on that podium, gold medal gleaming on his chest, pink coat draped over his shoulders like a cape, Izuku Midoriya looked out at the cameras broadcasting to millions of viewers and smiled. He'd made his statement. He'd shown the world exactly what he was capable of, and this was just the beginning. "Villains are evil, heroes are righteous. These terms changed throughout history," he murmured to himself, quiet enough that the microphones wouldn't pick it up. "But soon, I'll stand at the top, and when I do, the world will dance on my strings." The first part of his journey at U.A. was complete. He'd established himself as the most powerful student in his year, possibly in the entire school. He demonstrated abilities that defied conventional understanding. He'd made allies uncomfortable and enemies terrified, and he'd done it all while laughing, enjoying every moment, reveling in the power that flowed through his fingers like invisible threads of fate itself. This was Izuku Midoriya. This was Heavenly Yaksha, and the world had no idea what was coming next. The aftermath of the sports festival was explosive in ways the organizers never anticipated. Izuku stood in Principal Nezu's office 3 days after his victory, the small chimera sitting behind his desk with that unsettling smile that suggested he knew far more than he let on. Beside him sat All Might in his deflated form, something Izuku had deduced within days of meeting the symbol of peace, and Aizawa, looking more exhausted than usual. "The Hero Public Safety Commission has requested a meeting with you," Nezu said, sipping his tea. "They're concerned about your performance at the sports festival." "Concerned?" Izuku's laugh filled the office. Fu, let me guess. Too brutal, too efficient, too willing to demonstrate actual combat capability instead of playing hero dress-up? "Young Midoriya," All Might's voice was strained, "you controlled your classmate like a puppet in front of millions of viewers. You made Todoroki surrender using his own hand. The optics. The optics showed exactly what I intended," Izuku interrupted, leaning back in his chair with that infuriating smirk. "That I'm stronger than everyone else in my year, possibly stronger than most pro heroes, and that I won't hold back to make people feel comfortable." He adjusted his sunglasses. The commission can request all the meetings they want. I'll attend, but I won't apologize for being what this world actually needs. Aizawa's eyes narrowed. And what's that? Someone willing to dominate, to control, to make the hard choices that heroes with your ideals can't stomach. Izuku's grin widened. The villain attack at USJ proved my methods work. I neutralized an entire assault force, saved my classmates, and did it all without a single student casualty. Can you say the same about most villain encounters? The room fell silent. The meeting is tomorrow at 3, Nezu said finally. I suggest you prepare your arguments carefully. The commission has significant influence over hero licensing. Izuku stood, draping his pink coat over his shoulders. Let them bring their influence. I'll bring my strings. He paused at the door. Oh, and Sensei? You might want to inform the commission that threatening my hero career would be unwise. I have information they'd prefer stayed private. Fu. He left before anyone could respond. The Hero Public Safety Commission headquarters was a towering structure of glass and steel in the heart of Tokyo, a monument to bureaucratic power disguised as heroic oversight. Izuku walked through its doors with the confidence of someone who knew he held all the cards. The meeting room was intimidating by design. Long table, harsh lighting, multiple commission members seated in judgment. At the head sat Madam President herself, an elderly woman with sharp eyes and a sharper reputation for crushing anyone who threatened the status quo. Izuku Midoriya, she began without preamble. Your performance at the sports festival has raised serious concerns about your suitability for hero work. Has it? Izuku settled into his chair, crossing one leg over the other. And here I thought dominating the competition, protecting my classmates from villain attack, and demonstrating overwhelming combat capability would be considered assets. Your methods are concerning, another commission member interjected, a man with severe features. Controlling opponents like puppets, causing permanent injuries to criminals, threatening fellow students. I neutralized threats, Izuku corrected. Those criminals attacked a school with intent to kill. I stopped them using the most efficient means available. As for my classmates, not one of them suffered injury during my matches. Can the same be said for other students' battles? I believe Todoroki inflicted frostbite on several opponents. Madam President's expression didn't change. There's a difference between collateral damage in competition and deliberate humiliation. Is there? Izuku's smile was cold. Or is the real issue that I made the entire hero course look weak by comparison? That I demonstrated abilities and strategic thinking that make your carefully cultivated future heroes seem like children playing dress-up? The temperature in the room dropped several degrees. You're walking a dangerous line, boy, the severe man growled. Fu. Am I? Izuku leaned forward, his voice taking on that theatrical quality that made people simultaneously captivated and terrified. Let me tell you what I think is dangerous. A hero society so obsessed with image and public perception that it prioritizes comfort over effectiveness. A system that teaches students to hold back, to fight with honor, to give villains sporting chances they'll never reciprocate. He stood, strings already extending from his fingers in a casual display of power. The USJ attack proved my point perfectly. While heroes debated the proper response, while they worried about escalation and public opinion, I eliminated the threat. Completely. Decisively. And yes, some of those villains will never fully recover. But you know what else? They'll never attack another school. They'll never hurt another student. They'll spend the rest of their lives as warnings to anyone else who thinks U.A. is an easy target. You're describing vigilantism, Madam President said quietly, unregulated violence outside the law. I'm describing effectiveness. Izuku's eyes gleamed behind his sunglasses. And before you threaten my hero license, let me remind you of something. I have detailed recordings of every hero agency corruption case you've swept under the rug in the past 5 years. I have evidence of commission members receiving bribes from weapons manufacturers. I have proof that you've been manipulating crime statistics to maintain public faith in the hero system. The room went deathly silent. How? Someone started. How did I obtain that information? Izuku's laugh was sharp and dangerous. The same way I defeated that Nomu at USJ, the same way I dominated the sports festival. I'm better at this than you are. Better at strategy, better at information gathering, better at understanding how power actually works in this world. He moved toward the door, pausing to look back at the shocked commission members. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to approve my hero license when the time comes. You're going to stay out of my way while I revolutionize what heroism means in this country. And in exchange, I won't release every piece of dirty laundry I've collected on this organization. His grin was pure malice. Villains are evil, heroes are righteous. These terms change throughout history, and I'm about to change them again. Madam President's face was carved from stone. You're making powerful enemies, Midoriya. Foo. Good. Powerful enemies make life interesting. Weak ones are just boring. He opened the door. Oh, and one more thing. If any commission members or their affiliated heroes attempt to interfere with my development at UA, I'll assume our agreement is void. And trust me, you don't want that. He left the Hero Public Safety Commission headquarters with the same confidence he'd entered, knowing he'd just declared war on the most powerful organization in hero society, and he couldn't wait to see how they'd respond. Back at UA, the first-year students were buzzing with anticipation for their first real hero internships. Pro heroes from across the country had sent offers based on sports festival performances, and students were selecting agencies that matched their goals and abilities. Izuku received over 4,000 offers, more than any student in UA history, surpassing even Todoroki's impressive haul. But most were from agencies hoping to guide him toward more appropriate hero behavior, to sand down his rough edges and make him palatable for public consumption. He rejected them all. Instead, he sought out someone different. Someone who understood that power came in many forms, and that the strongest heroes weren't always the ones who smiled for cameras. Endeavor's agency responded within an hour of Izuku's inquiry. The meeting took place in Endeavor's private office, the number 2 hero sitting behind his desk with flames flickering around his shoulders. His reputation preceded him, obsessed with surpassing all might, ruthless in combat, harsh with subordinates. Exactly the kind of pragmatic hero Izuku could respect. Midoriya, Endeavor's voice was deep and gruff. Your sports festival performance was impressive. Brutal, but impressive. Why do you want to intern with my agency instead of one of the thousands courting you? Izuku met his gaze without flinching. Because you understand what it takes to stand at the top. You're not interested in playing the beloved symbol. You want to be the strongest, the most effective, the one who actually defeats villains instead of just posturing for cameras. Endeavor's flames intensified slightly. You sound like you have opinions about the current state of hero society. I have observations, Izuku corrected. The hero system prioritizes image over results, popularity over effectiveness. All Might smiles and waves while crime statistics are manipulated to maintain public confidence. Meanwhile, villains grow bolder because they know most heroes won't cross certain lines. And you will? I already have. Izuku's smile was sharp. The USJ villains can attest to that, those who still have functional vocal cords anyway. Foo. Endeavor studied him for a long moment. You're arrogant. I'm confident. There's a difference. You think you're better than other students. I know I am. I proved it at the sports festival. I proved it at USJ. I'll continue proving it until everyone else accepts reality. The number 2 hero's expression was unreadable behind his flames. Then, surprisingly, he smiled. Not warmly, but with something like approval. You remind me of myself at your age, that same hunger for the top, that same refusal to accept second place. He stood, moving to the window overlooking the city. My agency doesn't coddle interns. We put them in real situations, face them against real villains, and evaluate their performance under actual combat conditions. Many students can't handle the pressure. I'm not most students, Izuku said simply. No, you're not. Endeavor turned back to face him. All right, Midoriya, I'll accept you as an intern, but understand this. I expect results. I expect you to push yourself beyond your current limits. And if you show even a hint of the weakness I see in so many young heroes today, I'll send you back to UA without hesitation. Izuku's grin widened. Foo. I'd expect nothing less. When do we start? Tomorrow morning, 6 a.m. Don't be late. As Izuku left Endeavor's agency, he felt something he hadn't experienced much at UA. Genuine anticipation. This internship would be different. This would be real hero work, the kind that actually mattered. the kind where he could truly demonstrate what Heavenly Yaksha was capable of. The first 3 days of the internship were deliberately mundane. Patrol duty, crowd control, minor villain apprehensions. Endeavor was testing him, Izuku realized, seeing how he'd react to the boring aspects of hero work. Izuku performed flawlessly, using his observation haki to spot crimes before they happened, his strings to apprehend villains with minimal collateral damage, his armament haki when suspects got violent. He was efficient, professional, and utterly bored. On the 4th day, everything changed. Midoriya, Endeavor's voice crackled through his earpiece. "We have a situation. Villain attack in Hosu City, multiple confirmed casualties, unknown number of villains with powerful quirks. All available heroes are being mobilized." Finally, Izuku's heart rate increased, that familiar hunger for battle awakening. "I'm ready. You'll be supporting me directly. Stay close, follow orders, and don't engage alone unless absolutely necessary." Understood. They arrived in Hosu via helicopter, the city skyline visible in the distance, and so was the smoke rising from multiple locations. As they descended, Izuku's observation haki flared to life, sensing the chaos below. Dozens of villains scattered throughout the city, all attacking simultaneously. Coordinated assault, professional execution. This wasn't random violence, this was a planned operation. And at the center of it all, Izuku's haki detected something that made his blood sing with anticipation. Something powerful, something dangerous, something worth fighting. They touched down in the middle of a war zone. Buildings burned, civilians screamed and fled, villains rampaged through the streets. Endeavor immediately engaged a group attacking a shopping district, his flames incinerating their attacks. Midoriya, clear the eastern sector, get civilians to safety, and neutralize any villains you encounter. Izuku didn't respond verbally, he just moved. Strings shot out in every direction, creating a massive web across several city blocks. Civilians caught in the threads were gently pulled toward safety zones, lifted over debris, and carried away from danger. Villains, on the other hand, found the same strings cutting through their weapons, binding their limbs, rendering them helpless in seconds. 5 color strings, Izuku said, and 5 razor-sharp threads from each hand sliced through a group of thugs attempting to loot a burning store. They collapsed, screaming, limbs severed but alive. More villains emerged from an alley, 7 of them, all with combat-oriented quirks. One could stretch his limbs, another generated acid, a third had stone skin. Spider's web. Invisible strings filled the alley in an instant, the villains running straight into the trap. They struggled, tried to use their quirks, but Izuku's threads were too strong, too precisely positioned. Parasite. He took control of all 7 simultaneously, their bodies jerking like broken marionettes as he infiltrated their nervous systems. Then he made them walk themselves to the nearest police checkpoint and surrender. Fu. This is too easy. Where are the real threats? As if answering his question, his observation haki screamed a warning. Danger. Massive danger. Coming from the north, moving fast. Izuku turned just in time to see something that made his grin widen impossibly far. A creature. Humanoid but wrong, covered in exposed muscles and bladed appendages. Its brain was visible, pulsing with unnatural energy. Multiple quirks radiated from its body. Strength enhancement, regeneration, possibly others he couldn't immediately identify, another Nomu. But this one was different. Faster. Smarter. The way it moved suggested actual intelligence, not the mindless bioweapon from USJ. Finally, Izuku breathed, excitement coursing through his veins. Something interesting. The Nomu's head swiveled toward him, and for a moment they simply stared at each other. Then it moved. The speed was incredible. Faster than the USJ Nomu, faster than almost anything Izuku had fought. It closed the distance in less than a second, blade-like appendage already swinging toward his throat. Izuku's observation haki saw it coming. He tilted his head slightly, the blade missing by millimeters, and countered with bullet string. Dozens of haki-coated threads shot toward the Nomu's exposed brain, moving with enough force to penetrate steel. The creature's other appendages moved to intercept, creating a defensive web that caught most of the strings, but not all. 3 threads pierced through, stabbing into the Nomu's brain tissue. It should have been fatal. It should have ended the fight. Instead, the Nomu regenerated instantly, brain matter reforming as fast as Izuku destroyed it. Fu. Excellent. You're actually worth my time. The battle that followed was poetry written in violence. Izuku used every technique in his arsenal, testing the Nomu's capabilities. Overheat strings sliced through its appendages. They regenerated. God thread erupted from the ground, wrapping around its body. It broke free with raw strength. Flap thread created bullet-like projectiles from every direction. It dodged with impossible agility. This wasn't like the USJ Nomu. This one had been designed specifically to counter string-based quirks, to fight someone exactly like Izuku, which made it perfect. Armament, full body. Black Haki coated Izuku's entire form, and he charged directly at the Nomu. Their clash created a shockwave that shattered windows in nearby buildings. Izuku's Haki-enhanced punches met the Nomu's bladed appendages, each impact generating sparks and thunder. They fought through the streets, destroying everything around them. Izuku's strings created complex attack patterns, while his observation Haki predicted the Nomu's counters. The creature's regeneration meant he couldn't rely on simple damage. He needed to find its weakness, exploit it. His observation Haki expanded, diving deeper into the Nomu's body, reading its biosignature. There, at the base of its skull, where the spinal cord connected to the brain, a control chip, artificial, the source of its enhanced intelligence. Found you. Izuku created a distraction with spider's web, massive threads erupting from all directions. While the Nomu focused on defending against the visible attacks, invisible strings, coated in armament Haki for hardness but thin enough to be nearly undetectable, snaked around its defenses. They found the control chip. Parasite. The strings infiltrated the chip's circuitry, overriding its commands, feeding conflicting signals directly into the Nomu's enhanced brain. The creature jerked, its movements becoming erratic, its regeneration faltering as its body couldn't decide which injuries to prioritize. Izuku didn't give it time to adapt. Break white. 16 massive string waves, each coated in armament Haki, erupted from the ground in a circle around the Nomu. They crashed inward simultaneously, the combined force enough to pulverize concrete and bend steel. The Nomu was caught in the center, its body shredded by the overlapping waves of destruction. Even its incredible regeneration couldn't keep up with damage from 16 different sources at once. When the strings dispersed, the creature lay motionless in a crater, still breathing but completely incapacitated. Izuku stood over it, not even breathing hard, his grin sharp and satisfied. You were good. Better than your predecessor at USJ. But still not enough. Fu. Impressive. The voice came from above. Izuku looked up to see a man standing on a nearby building's roof. Lean, scarred, covered in what looked like exposed muscle tissue held together with staples. Blue flames flickered around his hands. Dabi. Izuku's mind supplied the name from his extensive villain research. The League of Villains sends their regards, Dabi said, his voice dripping with mockery. We've been watching you, Heavenly Yaksha. Your performance at USJ caught our leader's attention. Did it? Izuku's smile widened. And what does your leader want? An autograph? A conversation about the future of hero society and those strong enough to change it. Dabi's flames intensified. Shigaraki thinks you might be persuaded to see things our way. That someone with your power and your willingness to cross lines might understand what we're trying to accomplish. Fu. You came all the way here, attacked an entire city, deployed a Nomu specifically designed to fight me, all for recruitment? Izuku laughed, genuine amusement in his voice. That's either incredibly bold or incredibly stupid. We prefer ambitious. Another voice, this one feminine and sweet but with an edge of madness. A girl appeared beside Dabi, blonde hair and twin buns, school uniform, manic grin. Himiko Toga, nice to meet you. You're so cool, Midoriya. The way you cut up those villains at USJ, the way you control people like toys, it's so amazing. The League of Villains is gathering the strong, Dabi continued. Those who understand that hero society is broken, that the current system needs to be destroyed and rebuilt. Join us, and we can. No. The word cut through Dabi's pitch like a blade. No. The flame villain's expression darkened. You didn't even let me finish. I don't need to hear the rest. Your league wants to destroy hero society, tear down the current order, create chaos. Izuku's voice was calm, almost conversational. It's a predictable villain philosophy. Tear down what exists without having a clear vision for what comes next. Destruction for destruction's sake. He stepped closer to them, strings already extending from his fingers. But here's what you don't understand. I don't want to destroy hero society. I want to dominate it, to stand at the very top and remake it in my image. That requires the system to exist, broken, flawed, but functional enough to be conquered. His grin was sharp and cruel. Your league offers chaos. I prefer control. Dabi's flames exploded outward. Wrong answer. Blue fire filled the street, hot enough to melt metal, rushing toward Izuku in a wave of destruction. Armament. Black hockey coated Izuku's entire body, and he walked through the flames without slowing. The heat washed over his hardened form, unable to penetrate his defense. Is that all? How disappointing. Fu. Toga lunged with a knife, her movements fast and unpredictable, giggling manically. Izuku's observation haki tracked every motion, strings intercepting the blade and wrapping around her wrist. Bullet string. A dozen threads shot toward Dabi, each coated in armament haki, moving faster than gunfire. The villain created a wall of flames, but several strings pierced through, stabbing into his shoulders and legs. Parasite. Izuku took control of Dabi's motor functions, freezing him mid-movement. The villain's eyes went wide as his body refused to obey his commands. You came here thinking I'd be interested in your little rebellion, Izuku said, walking toward the paralyzed villains. But you made a fundamental miscalculation. I'm not a villain. I'm something far more dangerous, a hero who doesn't care about your rules, your philosophies, or your grand plans. He tightened the strings around Toga, lifting her off the ground. Tell Shigaraki that if he wants to talk, he can come himself instead of sending subordinates. Tell him that Izuku Midoriya doesn't join movements, he leads them. And tell him that the next time the League of Villains interferes with my path to the top, I won't just incapacitate his members. Izuku released Dabi's motor control but kept the strings embedded in his flesh. I'll kill them. The temperature dropped despite the surrounding flames. Both villains stared at him with new understanding. This wasn't a hero student they could recruit or manipulate. This was something else entirely. Now run along, Izuku said pleasantly, before I change my mind about letting you leave. Dabi's flames erupted again, this time as cover. When the fire cleared, both villains were gone, escaped through some pre-planned route. Izuku didn't pursue. He'd made his point. Midoriya! Endeavor's voice. The number 2 hero appeared, flames extinguishing as he took in the scene. The incapacitated Nomu, the destroyed street, Izuku standing untouched in the center of it all. What happened? Villain attack. League of Villains deployment. I neutralized the primary threat, he gestured to the Nomu, and discouraged recruitment attempts from secondary threats. Endeavor's eyes narrowed. The League of Villains tried to recruit you? They did. I declined, violently. Izuku's smile was sharp. They won't make that mistake again. The number 2 hero studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Good. Heroes who can't resist villain temptation have no place in this profession. He moved toward the Nomu, examining it with professional interest. This is the second Nomu you've defeated. The commission will want to debrief you extensively. Let them want. I'll provide information on my terms, not theirs. Izuku stretched, joints popping. Though I suppose I should mention, the League is planning something larger. The Nomu, the coordinated attacks, the recruitment attempts, they're building towards something significant. How do you know? Because that's what I do. Gather the strong, test hero responses, identify weaknesses in the system. His grin widened. Shigaraki might be unstable, but whoever's advising him understands strategy. This was reconnaissance disguised as recruitment. Endeavor's expression was grim. I'll report this to the commission. In the meantime, we need to... A scream cut through the air. Multiple screams, actually, coming from the Western District. Izuku's observation haki expanded, sensing the source. His eyes widened slightly, not with fear, but with excitement. There's something else here, something strong. Another villain, something better. Izuku was already moving, strings carrying him across rooftops toward the source of the disturbance, something that might actually make me try. They found him in an alley littered with bodies, not corpses, but paralyzed heroes and civilians, their eyes wide with terror. Standing over them was a man who radiated killing intent like others breathed air, the hero killer. Stain. He was exactly as the intelligence reports described. Tattered costume, blade-covered body, eyes burning with fanatical intensity. Blood dripped from his katana, and Izuku's haki immediately identified his quirk, blood-based paralysis, requiring ingestion to activate. More false heroes. Stain's voice was rough, filled with disgust. Come to stop the purge of the unworthy. Endeavor's flames erupted. Hero killer. Your rampage ends here. But Stain wasn't looking at Endeavor. His eyes were locked on Izuku, studying him with the intensity of a predator evaluating prey. You're different, the hero killer said slowly. The heavenly Yaksha. I've seen your methods. The way you butchered those villains at USJ without hesitation. The way you dominated the sports festival with overwhelming force. His grip tightened on his blade. Are you a true hero? Or another false symbol poisoning society? Izuku's laugh echoed through the alley. Foo 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 foo. A true hero? What an interesting question. He stepped forward, ignoring Endeavor's warning growl. Tell me, hero killer, what makes a hero true in your eyes? Selfless dedication to saving others, willingness to sacrifice everything for justice, the strength to stand against evil without compromise or corruption. Stain's voice was fervent, almost religious. Most who call themselves heroes are frauds, motivated by money, fame, glory. They disgrace the title with their weakness. And you appointed yourself judge, jury, and executioner to purge the unworthy. Izuku's smile was sharp. How delightfully arrogant. Tell me, does that make you a true hero? Or just a murderer with a philosophy? Stain moved. The hero killer was fast, far faster than his appearance suggested. His blade flashed toward Izuku's throat, coated in his own blood, ready to paralyze on contact. Izuku's observation haki saw it coming before the attack even began. He sidestepped, strings already forming a defensive web around his body. Overheat. Black haki-coated strings shot towards Stain, each one sharp enough to slice through steel. The hero killer dodged with incredible agility, his movements precise and economical, wasting no energy. You fight well, Stain acknowledged, circling. Better than most heroes. There's no hesitation in your attacks, no moral posturing. You strike to kill. I strike to win, Izuku corrected. Foo. Whether that means killing, capturing, or controlling depends entirely on what's most effective. Endeavor launched a massive fire attack, but Stain was already moving, his experience fighting multiple opponents evident in how he positioned himself to use the heroes against each other. Midoriya, coordinate your attacks with mine. Endeavor commanded, but Izuku had other ideas. God Thread. Massive haki-coated strings erupted from the ground in a circle around Stain, each one thick as a tree trunk, moving with devastating force. The hero killer's eyes widened. This wasn't a technique he'd seen before. He tried to dodge, but the strings were too many, too fast, coming from every direction simultaneously. They wrapped around his legs, his arms, his torso, binding him in place. Parasite. Izuku's strings infiltrated Stain's nervous system, taking control of his motor functions. The hero killer's body went rigid, fighting against the foreign control with impressive willpower. Strong, Izuku noted with genuine appreciation. Your mind is resisting my control better than anyone I've fought. That conviction, that absolute certainty in your beliefs, it makes you dangerous. Stain's eyes blazed with fury, his entire body trembling with the effort of fighting back. You use people like puppets, like toys. That's not heroic. Heroic? Izuku's laugh was cold. I'm not trying to be heroic, I'm trying to be effective, to stand at the top of this world and remake it in my image. He tightened his control, making Stain's body kneel despite the killer's resistance. You want to purge false heroes? I want to dominate hero society entirely. We both reject the current system. You through destruction, me through conquest. You're worse than them, Stain managed to grind out, using hero title for personal gain. Am I? Izuku tilted his head. Let me tell you what I see when I look at you, hero killer. A man so obsessed with his own definition of heroism that he murders anyone who doesn't measure up. A man who believes his vision is so absolute, so correct, that killing in its name is justified. His smile was terrifying. Sound familiar? Because that's exactly what I do, just with better PR and a student ID. The philosophical implications hung in the air like a blade. Endeavor finally managed to close the distance, flames ready to incinerate Stain. Step aside, Midoriya. This villain has killed 17 heroes. He needs to be stopped permanently. Agreed, Izuku said, surprising both Endeavor and Stain, but not by you. His strings tightened further, and Stain gasped as Izuku's armament haki-coated threads began crushing his limbs with methodical precision. You wanted to know if I'm a true hero, Izuku said, his voice calm and conversational despite the brutality he was inflicting. The answer is, I don't care. Hero, villain, vigilante, these are just labels society uses to categorize people. What matters is power. What matters is standing at the top and making the world dance on your strings. Crack Stain's right arm broke, bone shattering under the pressure of Izuku's hockey-enhanced strings. You killed 17 heroes because they didn't meet your standards. I'm going to break every bone in your body because you interfered with my development. Another crack, left arm this time. See the difference? You're motivated by ideology. I'm motivated by dominance. Midoriya. Endeavor's voice carried warning. That's enough. We need him alive for questioning. He is alive. Izuku pointed out reasonably, even as another sickening crack echoed through the alley. Right leg. I'm just ensuring he never kills again. Can't wield a blade with shattered hands, can't chase heroes with broken legs, can't spread his toxic philosophy when he's spending the rest of his life in a hospital bed. Stain's face was twisted in agony, but his eyes, those fanatical eyes, still burned with unbroken conviction. You prove my point. Heroes corrupted by power. Foo. Maybe. Or maybe I'm exactly what this world needs, someone willing to do what's necessary instead of what's comfortable. Izuku leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper only Stain could hear. You wanted to purge false heroes. I'm going to become the only hero that matters. And when I stand at the top, your ideology, your crusade, your entire existence will be remembered as nothing but a footnote in my rise to power. The final crack, Stain's left leg, the hero killer collapsed, conscious but completely incapacitated, every major limb shattered beyond immediate repair. Endeavor stared at the scene with an expression Izuku couldn't quite read. That was excessive. That was necessary, Izuku corrected, releasing his strings and watching Stain crumple to the ground. He's killed 17 heroes and would have continued killing if I'd just captured him normally. This way, even if he escapes somehow, he's no longer a physical threat. The Commission will have questions about your methods. Let them question. I'll tell them the same thing I told you. I did what needed to be done to neutralize a significant threat to hero society. Izuku adjusted his sunglasses, looking down at the broken hero killer with satisfaction. Results matter more than methods. As police and medical teams arrived to process the scene, as news helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting the aftermath to the entire country, Izuku stood apart from it all. He just defeated 3 significant threats in one day, a Nomu designed specifically to counter him, 2 League of Villains operatives, and the infamous hero killer. He demonstrated techniques most heroes never saw, showcased abilities that defied conventional understanding, and done it all while maintaining complete dominance. The media would have a field day. The Commission would intensify their scrutiny. His classmates would look at him with even more fear and awe. Perfect. His phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. Impressive display in Hosu. You're becoming quite the legend. We should talk about the future. A friend. Izuku stared at the message, his observation hockey unable to trace its origin. Someone with resources, intelligence, connections, and an interest in him specifically. Interesting. He deleted the message and pocketed his phone, filing the information away for later analysis. The world was changing around him, responding to his presence like water around a stone dropped in a pond. Ripples spreading outward, affecting everything they touched. And Izuku Midoriya stood at the center of it all, grinning like the heavenly yaksha he was becoming, ready for whatever came next. The return to U.A. after the Hosu incident was surreal. Izuku arrived to find the entire school transformed, additional security, emergency protocols updated, hero presence increased. All because villain activity had escalated, and the League of Villains specifically targeted hero students. His classmates greeted him with a mixture of reactions. Some looked odd that he'd fought both a Nomu and the hero killer in one day. Others seemed disturbed by the reports of how brutally he'd defeated Stain. Only one approached him directly. Midoriya. Todoroki's voice was carefully neutral. I saw the news about Hosu, about what you did to the hero killer. Did you? Izuku's smile was pleasant, giving away nothing. And what did you think? I think you broke every bone in a man's limbs on camera in front of the number 2 hero without hesitation. Todoroki's heterochromatic eyes were analytical. The media is calling you both a hero and a monster. The commission is in an uproar. Some people are demanding your expulsion from UA. And yet I'm still here, Izuku noted. Funny how that works. Fu. Why? The question came out sharper than Todoroki probably intended. Why go that far? Stain was already defeated when you broke him. You could have just captured him. Izuku's expression shifted, the pleasant mask falling away to reveal something colder underneath. Tell me, Todoroki, how many heroes has Stain killed? 17 confirmed. And how many more would he have killed if I'd simply captured him? If I'd let him keep his mobility, his ability to escape, his capacity for violence? Izuku stepped closer. Prison breaks happen, security fails. Villains like Stain have resources, supporters, people who believe in their cause. If I'd left him capable of fighting, he would have returned. More heroes would have died. So you crippled him permanently. I neutralized the threat completely, Izuku corrected. That's what real heroes do. They eliminate dangers to society, not just temporarily inconvenience them. Todoroki was silent for a long moment. You're not like any hero I've ever seen. Good. That means I'm doing something right. Izuku's grin returned. The world doesn't need more All Mights, more smiling symbols who inspire but don't fundamentally change anything. It needs someone willing to make the hard choices. Someone willing to dominate. That sounds like villain talk. Does it? Izuku's laugh was sharp. Or does it sound like someone who understands that power is the only currency that matters? Villains are evil, heroes are righteous. These terms change throughout history, Todoroki, and I'm about to change them again. He walked away, leaving his classmates standing in the hallway with a troubled expression. The emergency class meeting was called by Aizawa the following day. All of Class 1A assembled, tension palpable in the air. Due to recent villain activity and the increased targeting of UA students, their teacher began, his voice tired but firm, the school has decided to implement a new training program. You'll be taking summer courses focused on developing your ultimate moves, techniques unique to your quirks that can turn the tide of battle. Murmurs of excitement and nervousness rippled through the class. Additionally, Aizawa continued, his eyes sweeping across the room and lingering on Izuku. All students will undergo evaluation by pro heroes to ensure you're developing appropriately. Some of you, his gaze locked directly on Izuku now, have demonstrated capabilities that require additional oversight. Fu? Oversight? Izuku's voice cut through the murmurs. Is that what we're calling it? I prefer recognition of superiority, but I suppose bureaucracy needs its euphemisms. Midoriya, Aizawa's voice carried warning. The commission has requested a full demonstration of your abilities. Every technique, every application of your quirk, every aspect of this armament and observation you've mentioned. Requested, not demanded. Izuku's smile was sharp, and I'm declining. The classroom went dead silent. You don't have a choice, Aizawa said flatly. Don't I? Izuku stood, draping his pink coat over his shoulders with theatrical flair. Let me explain something about power, Sensei. The commission can request all they want. They can demand, threaten, posture. But ultimately, they can't force me to reveal abilities I choose to keep private, not without violating the very laws they claim to uphold. You're a student in a hero program. Transparency about your capabilities is required for proper training and evaluation. Is it? Show me the regulation. Izuku's grin widened at Aizawa's silence. I've read every UA policy, every commission guideline, every legal precedent regarding hero students and power disclosure. Nowhere does it say I must reveal every technique I possess. I'm required to demonstrate sufficient competency for advancement, which I've done repeatedly, but the extent of my full capabilities, that's my choice to share or withhold. This is bigger than policy. All Might's voice joined the conversation. The symbol of peace had been observing from the back of the classroom. The League of Villains targeted you specifically, young Midoriya. They deployed a Nomu designed to counter your quirk. That suggests they have intelligence on your abilities, intelligence we need to understand to protect you properly. Protect me? Izuku's laugh echoed through the room. Sensei, I've defeated 2 Nomu, crushed the hero killer, and sent League of Villains operatives running with their tails between their legs. I don't need protection. What I need is for everyone to stop treating me like a problem to be managed instead of an asset to be utilized. You're 17 years old? All Might said gently. I'm the strongest student in this school, Izuku countered. Age is irrelevant. Power is what matters, and I have more power than anyone wants to acknowledge. Bakugo slammed his fist on his desk. You arrogant bastard. You think you're so much better than everyone else. I don't think it, Bakugo. I know it. I've proven it repeatedly. Izuku's eyes swept across his classmates. Every single person in this room I could defeat. Easily. Some of you I could beat while fighting 3 of your classmates simultaneously. That's not arrogance. It's observable fact. That's enough. Aizawa's capture weapon uncoiled, his erasure activating. Your attitude is... Strings shot out before Aizawa could finish his sentence, wrapping around his capture weapon and yanking it from his control. The scarf clattered to the floor between them. The class gasped. Several students jumped to their feet. Izuku hadn't moved from his position, hands still in his pockets, smile never faltering. Your erasure quirk doesn't work on my strings once they're already manifested, Sensei. I discovered that during USJ. And my armament haki? That's not a quirk at all. It's a technique, a manifestation of fighting spirit. Your power can't erase what isn't technically a power to begin with. Aizawa's eyes widened slightly. You've been holding back even your counters to erasure? I've been holding back everything, Izuku said simply. Every fight, every training session, every demonstration, I've shown you exactly what I wanted you to see and nothing more. Did you really think I'd reveal all my capabilities to potential enemies? We're not your enemies, Ida stood, his voice indignant. We're your classmates, your allies. Are you? Izuku's gaze swept across them again, analytical and cold. Or are you potential obstacles? People who might try to stop me when I make decisions you disagree with? Heroes in training who've been taught that there's a right way to do things, and anyone who deviates is wrong? His smile turned sharp and cruel. I've seen how you all look at me. Fear, disgust, concern. You're not my allies. You're people who tolerate my presence because I'm useful, because I win fights, because having me on your side is better than having me against you. But the moment I cross a line you find unacceptable, the moment my methods become too brutal or too effective or too different from your idealized hero image, you'll turn on me. Don't pretend otherwise. The silence that followed was crushing. Yaoyorozu finally spoke, her voice careful. You don't trust anyone, do you? Trust is for people who need others, Izuku replied. I don't need anyone. I'm strong enough to stand alone, smart enough to manipulate those around me, and skilled enough to defeat anyone who opposes me. Trust is a liability I can't afford. That's the saddest thing I've ever heard. Uraraka's voice was small, almost pitying. Izuku's expression didn't change. It's the most rational thing you'll hear. The world isn't kind to those who trust blindly. It's cruel to the weak, dismissive of the powerless, and only respects strength. I learned that lesson early. Some of you will learn it eventually. The rest will die wondering why their heroic ideals didn't save them. He picked up his bag, slinging it over his shoulder. I'm going to train now. Alone. When the commission wants their demonstration, they can schedule it through proper channels, and I'll consider attending. Until then, I have better things to do than justify my existence to people who should be grateful I'm using my power to help instead of harm. Izuku walked toward the door, and this time, no one tried to stop him. As he reached the exit, All Might called out one more time. Young Midoriya, that philosophy will lead you down a dark path. Izuku paused, looking back over his shoulder. Fu. Dark? Light? These are perspectives, not absolutes. I'm going to stand at the top of this world and look down on everyone else. Whether that makes me a hero or a villain depends entirely on who's writing the history books. His grin widened. And I intend to be the one writing them. He left Class 1A in stunned silence, his laughter echoing down the hallway. The summer training course began the following week, and Izuku approached it with the same meticulous preparation he brought to everything else. While his classmates struggled to develop single ultimate techniques, he refined dozens. The training facility was massive, multiple zones designed to simulate different environments and scenarios. Students were assigned to groups based on their quirk types and training needs. Izuku requested solo training. His request was denied. You'll be working with Todoroki and Bakugo, the supervising hero, Cementos announced. All 3 of you have exceptional offensive capabilities and need practice working with others. Bakugo looked ready to explode. Todoroki's expression was carefully neutral. Izuku just smiled. This should be entertaining. The first training exercise was simple. Defeat a series of reinforced targets scattered throughout a mock urban environment. The catch? They had to work together, coordinating their attacks for maximum effectiveness. "I'll burn everything," Bakugo declared immediately. "You two stay out of my way." "We need strategy," Todoroki countered. "Random destruction won't." Fu. Let me simplify this. Izuku's strings shot out in every direction, wrapping around every target simultaneously. Overheat. The strings turned black with armament hockey and contracted in perfect unison. Every single target, 50 of them, was crushed to powder in less than 3 seconds. Cementos's jaw dropped. "That was... you just... completed the exercise," Izuku finished. Fu. Though I suppose that doesn't demonstrate teamwork very well. Does it? "You bastard!" Bakugo's hands sparked with explosions. "This is supposed to be training. You can't just... Can't what? Win efficiently? Demonstrate superior capability? Make the rest of you look slow by comparison?" Izuku's grin widened. "I thought we were here to develop ultimate techniques. I just showed you 50 simultaneous applications of mine." "He's right," Todoroki said quietly, and everyone turned to look at him. "We're approaching this wrong. Midoriya doesn't need this training. He's already developed multiple ultimate moves. We're the ones who need to catch up." "What?" Bakugo looked betrayed. "Look at what he just did. 50 targets, destroyed simultaneously, with perfect precision and overwhelming force. How many ultimate moves do you have, Bakugo?" "I have 2, Ice Wall and Fall and Fire Blast. You probably have 3 or 4 explosion variants." Midoriya just demonstrated that he can deploy dozens of string techniques, each with different applications, all while maintaining perfect control. Todoroki's heterochromatic eyes focused on Izuku with new understanding. "You're not training here to develop ultimate moves. You already have them. You're here for something else." Fu. Very perceptive, Todoroki. Izuku's smile turned approving. "I'm here because the school forced me to attend, because the commission wants oversight, because everyone's trying to understand what I'm capable of." He paused. "But what I'm actually doing? I'm studying all of you. Learning your techniques, your limitations, your strategies, because eventually some of you will oppose me. And when that happens, I'll already know exactly how to defeat you." The implications hung in the air like a guillotine blade. "You're planning to fight us?" Bakugo's voice was low and dangerous. "I'm planning for every eventuality," Izuku corrected. "If we remain allies, wonderful. If we become enemies, I'll be prepared. That's basic strategy. Always know your battlefield. Always know your opponents." "That's paranoid," Todoroki observed. "That's survival." Izuku's expression hardened. "You think Hero Society is stable? You think the current order will last forever? The League of Villains is growing stronger, developing Nomu specifically to counter top heroes. The Commission is corrupt and fractured. All Might is declining. Everyone can see it, even if they don't admit it. When the symbol of peace falls, this entire system will convulse. Wars will be fought over who gets to define what heroism means next." He looked at both of them directly. "And I'm going to win those wars. Not by hoping for the best, not by trusting in allies who might turn on me, but by being so overwhelmingly powerful that opposition becomes impossible. By knowing my potential enemies so well that defeating them is trivial." "You're insane," Bakugo said. "I'm realistic," Izuku countered. "You're still thinking like children playing hero. I'm thinking like someone who understands that power is the only thing that matters in this world." The training continued, but the dynamic had shifted. Bakugo attacked every exercise with renewed fury, trying to prove he wasn't inferior. Todoroki became analytical, studying Izuku's techniques with the focus of someone preparing for eventual conflict. And Izuku? He smiled and continued demonstrating capabilities that left his classmates scrambling to keep up. Break white. 16 massive string waves erupted from the ground, each one destroying a different reinforced barrier simultaneously. God thread. Thick hockey-coated strings burst from the earth like trees, creating a forest of razor-sharp threads that no one could navigate without his permission. Senju Kanon. 1,000 strings, all moving independently, each one capable of cutting steel, all controlled with perfect precision to create a defensive network that could intercept attacks from every direction simultaneously. With each technique, the gap between Izuku and his classmates became more obvious. Not just in power, though that was substantial, but in understanding. They were learning to use their quirks. He had already mastered his and moved on to applications they couldn't even conceptualize. Cementos filed a report that evening, recommending Izuku be moved to advanced solo training. The next day, the commission denied the request. They wanted him surrounded by peers, monitored, his capabilities cataloged. They wanted to understand what made Heavenly Yaksha tick. What they didn't understand was that every moment they spent trying to control him, he was learning to control them. The summer training culminated in a practical examination. Students would face actual villain scenarios with pro heroes playing the antagonists. Pass, and they'd receive their provisional licenses. Fail, and they'd need additional training. Izuku's examination was scheduled differently from everyone else's. Instead of facing a single pro hero, he was assigned multiple opponents simultaneously. Best Jeanist, Gang Orca, and Edgeshot, all top-ranking heroes, all with decades of experience. "This is excessive," Todoroki muttered as students gathered to watch the examination on monitors. "It's appropriate," Yaoyorozu corrected quietly. "They need to see what he can really do, and more importantly, they need to know if he can be stopped if he ever goes rogue." The examination arena was a mock city, complete with buildings, streets, and simulated civilians who needed rescuing. The scenario was simple. Izuku played the villain holding the civilians hostage. The three pro heroes had to rescue them and subdue him. Fu. 3-on-1? Izuku's laugh echoed through the arena as he took his position. Finally, something approaching a fair fight. "Arrogant kid," Gang Orca's deep voice rumbled. "Let's teach him some humility." "This isn't about humility," Best Jeanist said, his fiber manipulation quirk already activating. "This is about assessment. Midoriya, show us your full capabilities. Don't hold back." Izuku's grin widened impossibly far. "As you wish." The examination began, and Izuku immediately deployed Spider's Web. Invisible strings filled the entire arena in less than 2 seconds, creating a three-dimensional network of razor-sharp threads that the heroes couldn't see but could feel when they tried to move through them. Best Jeanist's fiber manipulation encountered Izuku's strings, and the two quirks clashed, thread against thread, control against control. For a moment, they were evenly matched. Then Izuku activated Armament Haki. His strings turned black and cut through Best Jeanist fibers like they were tissue paper, wrapping around the hero's arms and legs before he could react. Parasite. Best Jeanist's body went rigid as Izuku took control of his motor functions, puppeting the hero like a marionette. Gang Orca charged from another direction, his sonic waves already firing. Attacks powerful enough to disorient most opponents and cause pain through sound alone. Izuku's observation haki predicted the attack trajectory. Athlete. Strings attached to the buildings above, and Izuku launched himself into the air, dodging the sonic blast entirely, while simultaneously controlling Best Jeanist to create a fiber barrier that blocked Gang Orca's follow-up. Edgeshot attempted to close in with his folding ability, his body compressing to paper-thin dimensions to slip through Izuku's string defenses. Bullet string. Dozens of hockey-coated threads shot toward Edgeshot, faster than bullets, each one aimed with perfect precision. Even compressed, the ninja hero had to dodge, his incredible speed barely keeping him ahead of Izuku's attacks. 3 top pro heroes, all simultaneously engaged, none gaining ground. Izuku landed on a building rooftop, still controlling Best Jeanist like a puppet. His strings tracking Gang Orca's movements, his observation haki predicting Edgeshot's next attempt. "This is what you wanted to see, isn't it?" His voice carried across the arena, amplified by strings vibrating like guitar strings. "My full capabilities, my true strength." He raised both hands, and the strings throughout the arena began to vibrate with resonance. "Let me show you something I've been developing. An application of my awakened quirk combined with Conqueror's haki." The air itself seemed to thicken, pressure building throughout the arena. Students watching on monitors felt it even through the screens. A crushing weight, a sense of overwhelming dominance that made it hard to breathe. Heavenly birdcage. Strings erupted from the ground and sky simultaneously, forming a massive cage that encompassed the entire arena. But these weren't normal strings. They were infused with Conqueror's haki, radiating willpower so intense that weaker-willed individuals would simply pass out from the pressure. Inside the cage, the three pro heroes felt the full force of Izuku's presence. Gang Orca's resolve wavered for the first time in his career. Edgeshot had to compress further, just to avoid being overwhelmed. Best Jeanist, still under Izuku's direct control, experienced the haki from the inside and actually groaned in discomfort. This technique, Izuku's voice was calm, almost conversational, creates an inescapable cage that grows smaller over time. Eventually, everything inside will be cut to pieces by the contracting strings. Gray. The only way to escape is to cut through threads reinforced with both my awakened quirk and my Conqueror's haki, something that requires either overwhelming strength or incredible technique. The cage began contracting, strings moving inward from all directions. The pro heroes attempted to counter. Gang Orca's sonic blasts, Edgeshot's precision strikes, even Best Jeanist's fiber manipulation working against Izuku's control. All of it focused on breaking the cage. The strings didn't even scratch. Fu. Do you understand now? This is the difference between us. You're powerful, experienced, skilled, but I operate on a level you can't reach. I have abilities you can't counter. I've developed techniques specifically designed to defeat opponents stronger than myself. The cage contracted further. The heroes were running out of room, their options dwindling. Yield, Izuku commanded. Acknowledge your defeat, and I'll release you unharmed. Pride warred with pragmatism on the heroes' faces. This was supposed to be an examination, but it had become something else. A demonstration of complete dominance. Gang Orca was the first to speak. This is beyond pro-hero level. This is something else entirely. I yield, Best Jeanist said, his voice strained through Izuku's control. You've made your point, Midoriya. Edgeshot held out the longest, his ninja training refusing to admit defeat. But eventually, as the cage contracted to the point where movement became impossible, he too nodded. Acknowledged. You win. The heavenly birdcage dispersed, strings retracting back into Izuku's body. The three pro heroes stood in the center of the arena, unharmed but clearly shaken. The examination ended with a result that surprised no one who'd been paying attention. Perfect score. Izuku Midoriya passed with the highest marks ever recorded in provisional license examination history, but more importantly, he'd sent a message. To the commission watching, to his classmates observing, to every pro hero who thought they understood what he was capable of. Izuku Midoriya, Heavenly Yaksha, was not just strong, he was overwhelming. He possessed abilities that defied categorization, techniques that countered even experienced heroes, and a strategic mind that could outthink opponents before the fight even began. He was everything hero society feared in a single package, and he was just getting started. The provisional license results were announced that evening in a formal ceremony. Students gathered in the auditorium, nervous energy palpable as names were called and licenses distributed. When Izuku's name was announced, the applause was complicated. Some clapped enthusiastically, impressed by his performance. Others remained silent, disturbed by what they'd witnessed. A few looked actively frightened. Izuku accepted his provisional hero license with that signature smirk, knowing it represented both validation and freedom. With this license, he could operate as a hero independently, make his own decisions about villain encounters, and answer to significantly less oversight. Perfect. After the ceremony, as students dispersed to celebrate or commiserate, Izuku found himself approached by an unexpected visitor. Principal Nezu stood in the hallway, his perpetual smile somehow more unsettling than usual. Midoriya. A word, if you please. They walked to Nezu's office in silence, the small chimera's intelligence radiating like heat. Once inside, Nezu poured tea with practiced precision before speaking. That was quite the display during your examination. 3 top pro heroes defeated simultaneously, a technique that created an inescapable cage, Conqueror's haki strong enough to affect even experienced heroes. He sipped his tea. You've been holding back significantly more than anyone realized. Have I? Izuku's tone was innocent, but his smile gave nothing away. Don't insult my intelligence. Nezu's voice remained pleasant, but there was steel underneath. You possess abilities far beyond what you've shown. That observation haki that lets you predict movements, the armament haki that makes your strings virtually indestructible, and now this conqueror's hockey that projects your willpower as a physical force. He set down his teacup with a soft clink. These aren't quirk variations. They're something else entirely. Something unique to you that exists outside the normal parameters of how powers work in our world. Izuku studied the principle carefully. And if they are, what would you do with that information? That depends entirely on what you intend to do with those abilities. Nezu's eyes were sharp, analytical. You're the most powerful student this school has ever produced, possibly more powerful than many active pro heroes. You could become the greatest hero in history, or the greatest threat. Those aren't mutually exclusive categories, Izuku pointed out. The greatest heroes are always threats to someone, to villains, to corruption, to the status quo. True, but most heroes are threats to things we want threatened. You, Midoriya, seem poised to threaten the entire system. Only if the system deserves to be threatened. Nezu leaned back in his chair, his small form somehow commanding despite its size. Let me tell you a story. Before the current hero system, before quirks became regulated and licensed, there was chaos. People with power did whatever they wanted. Consequences be damned. The society nearly collapsed under the weight of unregulated superhuman abilities. And then heroes rose to bring order, Izuku finished. I've read the history books, Principal, the romanticized version where noble individuals sacrificed for the greater good and established a system of justice. Is that skepticism I hear? It's realism. The current hero system wasn't built by idealists. It was built by people strong enough to impose their vision on everyone else. All Might stands as symbol of peace, not because he's morally superior, but because he's powerful enough that opposing him is impossible. The system works because the strongest hero supports it. Izuku leaned forward, his eyes intense. So what happens when All Might falls? When that symbol crumbles and a power vacuum opens? Do you really think the system will survive on its ideological merits? Or will it collapse and be rebuilt by whoever proves strongest in the aftermath? Nezu was silent for a long moment. You're preparing for that eventuality. I'm ensuring that when it comes, I'm the one doing the rebuilding. Izuku's grin was sharp. Fu. You wanted to know my intentions, Principal? There they are. I'm going to stand at the top of Hero Society, remake it in my image, and ensure that the new order is stronger, more effective, and more honest about the nature of power than the current facade. That sounds like a coup. That sounds like evolution, the strong replacing the weak, the effective superseding the inefficient, the real overtaking the fake. Nezu sipped his tea again, his expression unreadable. And if I tried to stop you, if I decided that your philosophy makes you too dangerous to graduate from U.A. Izuku's strings extended from his fingers in a casual display of power, wrapping around his own teacup and lifting it to his lips without him touching it. Then you'd fail. Because I'm stronger than you, smarter than you realize, and more prepared for opposition than you can imagine. You're incredibly intelligent, Principal Nezu, possibly the smartest being in Japan. But intelligence without power is just observation. And I have both. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Then Nezu laughed, a genuine, delighted sound that seemed incongruous with the heavy conversation. Excellent. This is exactly what I hoped to hear. Izuku blinked, thrown off balance for the first time in the conversation. What? You think I want to stop you? Nezu's smile widened. Midoriya, I've spent decades watching Hero Society calcify into comfortable corruption. I've seen the Commission prioritize PR over actual heroism, watch talented students crushed under the weight of expectations and regulations, witness the systematic suppression of anything that threatens the status quo. He stood, walking to the window overlooking UA's campus. Someone needs to shake this system to its foundations. Someone needs to remind everyone that power matters more than image, that results matter more than process, that the strong have the right, the obligation, to lead. He looked back at Izuku. I've been waiting for someone like you, someone strong enough to challenge the order, someone smart enough to rebuild it better. Izuku stared at the small chimera with new understanding. You're saying you support what I'm trying to do? I'm saying I won't oppose it. There's a difference. Nezu returned to his desk. I can't actively help you. My position requires at least a facade of supporting the current system, but I also won't hinder your development or report your full capabilities to the Commission. Consider it academic interest in seeing how far you can go. Why? Because I was created through human experimentation, tortured and modified until I became intelligent enough to escape and claim personhood under Hero Society's laws. Nezu's voice was calm, but something dark flickered in his eyes. I understand better than most that the current system was built on ugly foundations. If you're going to tear it down and rebuild it, I want to see if you can do better than those who came before. Izuku processed this information, his mind racing through implications and possibilities. An ally in Principal Nezu, even a passive one, was more valuable than a dozen active supporters. What do you want in return? But when you reach the top, when you remake Hero Society in your image, remember this conversation. Remember that I gave you space to develop without interference. And perhaps when you're deciding what the new order looks like, consider that intelligence and experience have value alongside raw power. Izuku's smile returned. Fu. You want a place in the new world I'm going to create. I want to ensure the new world is built by someone who thinks strategically, rather than someone who thinks ideologically. You're ruthless, Midoriya, but you're not needlessly cruel. You're dominant, but you're not tyrannical. You understand that systems require foundations beyond just force. Nezu extended a small paw. Do we have an understanding? Izuku shook it, his larger hand engulfing the principles, and felt the seal of an alliance that would shape the future of Hero Society. We do. As Izuku left Nezu's office, his mind was already cataloging the advantages this arrangement provided. With the principal's passive support, he had significantly more freedom to operate within U.A. The Commission couldn't pressure the school to restrict him without Nezu's cooperation, and Nezu had just declared he wouldn't cooperate. Perfect. His phone buzzed again. Another message from that unknown number. You're making interesting allies. Nezu is smart but idealistic in his own way. You'll outgrow him eventually. When you do, contact me. I have resources you'll find valuable. A friend. Izuku stared at the message, his observation haki trying and failing to sense anything about the sender. Whoever this was, they had incredible intelligence capabilities, resources to monitor his activities in real time, and enough confidence to believe they could offer him something valuable. All Might? No, too direct for the symbol of peace's style. Endeavor? Possible, but the tone was wrong. Someone from the Commission? Unlikely given what he'd said to them. He filed the mystery away for later investigation and continued walking through UA's corridors, his mind already moving to the next phase of his development. The provisional license opened new doors. Real hero work. Real villains. Real opportunities to demonstrate why Heavenly Yaksha deserved to stand at the top, and Izuku intended to seize every single one of them. The weeks following provisional license acquisition brought a new rhythm to U, life. Students could now respond to actual villain incidents during approved hours, working alongside established heroes to gain experience. Most of Class 1A approached this cautiously, partnering with pro heroes who could provide oversight and guidance. Izuku went alone. The first incident he responded to was a convenience store robbery. 3 villains with minor quirks attempting to steal cash and intimidate civilians. Standard low-level crime that most heroes would resolve with minimal force. Izuku walked through the door, his pink coat flowing behind him, and the robbers actually laughed. Look at this kid. Someone call your mommy, hero boy? Fu. No, but you might want to call yours. You'll need someone to identify your bodies. The laughter died. Is that a threat? One villain, his quirk appeared to be enhanced strength, stepped forward aggressively. You think you can. 5 color strings. The villain's sentence ended in a scream as razor-sharp threads sliced through his arms and legs, severing muscles and tendons without actually removing limbs. He collapsed, bleeding and unable to move. The other 2 villains tried to run. Bullet string. Threads shot through their legs faster than they could react, puncturing knees and ankles, rendering escape impossible. They collapsed in the doorway, screaming. Izuku walked calmly to the terrified civilians huddled behind the counter. You're safe now. I apologize for the mess. The police will arrive shortly to process these criminals. You just... The clerk couldn't finish the sentence, staring at the bleeding villains. Neutralize threats to civilian safety, Izuku finished. That's what heroes do. Though I suppose most heroes would have tried to capture them gently, worried about excessive force, concerned about their rights. His smile was sharp. I'm not most heroes. The police arrived 10 minutes later to find Izuku sitting on the counter, the 3 villains incapacitated and whimpering on the floor, and several traumatized civilians giving statements about the terrifying hero student. The incident made local news. Opinions were divided. Some praised his effectiveness, others condemned his brutality. The Hero Public Safety Commission issued a statement reminding provisional license holders about appropriate force levels. Izuku ignored it and responded to the next incident the following day. This pattern continued for weeks. Every villain encounter ended the same way. Overwhelming force, complete dominance, criminals left alive but severely injured, and media debate about whether Heavenly Yaksha was a hero or a menace. His classmates watched this unfold with growing concern. He's going to get his license revoked, Ida said during lunch one day, his voice carrying worry. The commission can't tolerate this level of violence indefinitely. They can if it works, Yaoyorozu countered, though she looked troubled. Crime in the areas Midoriya patrols has dropped dramatically. Villains are actively avoiding those zones because they're terrified of encountering him. That's not heroism, that's intimidation. Isn't it both? Todoroki's quiet voice cut through the argument. He's protecting civilians through fear. It's effective even if it's not traditional. Bakugo slammed his tray down. Who cares about traditional? He's making the rest of us look weak. Every time he takes down a villain in 30 seconds, every time he makes it look easy, it makes everyone else seem incompetent. Maybe we are, Tokoyami said softly, compared to him. The lunch table fell silent at that admission because it was true. Izuku Midoriya operated on a different level than his peers, not just in power, though that gap was substantial, but in mindset. While they played at being heroes, learning and growing and making mistakes, he dominated. Completely. Totally, without hesitation or remorse, and the gap was widening. The incident that changed everything happened on a rainy Tuesday evening. Izuku was returning from another successful villain apprehension when his observation haki detected something unusual, a massive concentration of power moving through the city with purpose. Not a villain, exactly. The signature was too controlled, too deliberate. He followed it to an abandoned warehouse district, his strings already extending in preparation for combat. Inside the largest warehouse, he found exactly what his haki had sensed, All Might, but not the symbol of peace in his muscular form. This was the skeletal, deflated All Might that Izuku had deduced existed. The true form, the dying ember of a flame that once burned bright enough to illuminate the entire country. Young Midoriya. All Might's voice was rough, the exhaustion evident. I thought I might find you here. Did you? Izuku tilted his head, studying the diminished hero. And why would you come looking for me specifically in your weakened state in an abandoned warehouse? This seems like the setup for either a dramatic confrontation or a secret conversation. The latter. All Might gestured to a crate, sitting down with visible effort. We need to talk about your future, about what you're becoming. Fu. What I'm becoming? I'm becoming exactly what I've always been, someone who understands that power is the only currency that matters in this world. That's what concerns me. All Might's eyes were serious, lacking the usual sparkle of hope. I've watched you, Midoriya. Watched how you fight, how you think, how you interact with others. You're brilliant, powerful, and completely without the compassion that defines true heroism. Compassion is weakness disguised as virtue, Izuku replied. It makes heroes hesitate, makes them vulnerable, makes them die when they could have survived by being ruthless. Or it makes them worth saving in the first place. All Might's voice rose, surprising both of them with its intensity. A hero without compassion is just a powerful person imposing their will on others. That's not heroism, that's tyranny. And yet tyranny often brings more stability than democracy. Order through strength versus chaos through freedom, which actually protects more people. All Might was silent for a long moment, his skeletal frame seeming to diminish further. I'm dying, he finally said. Izuku had known this, had deduced it from observation and analysis, but hearing it stated plainly still carried weight. How long? A year, maybe less. All Might's smile was sad, a ghost of his usual expression. My power is fading, the symbol of peace is crumbling, and when I'm gone, Hero Society will face a crisis unlike anything it's experienced before. I know. Do you? All Might looked up, meeting Izuku's eyes. Do you understand that the world needs a new symbol when I'm gone? Someone to inspire hope, to show people that goodness can triumph, that heroes can be trusted? I understand that the world needs a new power when you're gone, Izuku corrected. Someone strong enough to maintain order, to crush villain opposition, to stand at the top and force everyone else to follow. Whether that inspires hope is irrelevant as long as it's effective. That's not what I want to hear. Then you should have had this conversation with someone else. Izuku's smile was sharp. I'm not your successor, All Might. I'm not going to inherit your philosophy or your methods. I'm going to stand where you stood, but I'm going to do it my way, through dominance, not inspiration. Through fear, not hope. Through absolute control, not gentle guidance. All Might stood, his movements pained but determined. I have a power, a quirk called One for All. It's been passed down through generations, each user adding their strength to the next, creating an accumulating power that grows with each inheritor. I've been searching for someone worthy to receive it, someone who could become the next symbol of peace. He looked at Izuku with something like regret. I thought about offering it to you. Your intelligence, your determination, your sheer force of will, combined with One for All, you'd be unstoppable. The greatest hero who ever lived. But, Izuku prompted, already knowing the answer. But you'd use that power to dominate rather than inspire. You'd become a symbol of fear instead of peace. And that's not what the world needs when I'm gone. Isn't it? Izuku stepped closer. Your symbol of peace worked because you were strong enough to back it up. Take away the strength, and it's just empty philosophy. The world doesn't need another All Might. It can't have one. You're irreplaceable by design. What it needs is someone who understands that the symbol was always built on power, and power is what will maintain order when you're gone. I'm giving One for All to someone else, All Might said firmly. Someone with the heart of a true hero. Someone who will use that power to save people with a smile. Good for them. Izuku's smile didn't waver. I don't need your power, All Might. I have my own. And unlike One for All, which requires passing down and inheriting, my strength is entirely mine. Built through my own effort, developed through my own training, applied according to my own philosophy. He turned to leave, then paused. When your successor appears, when you pass on One for All to whoever you've chosen, send them my way. I'd like to see if inherited power can match earned dominance. Fu. Midoriya, wait. But Izuku was already gone, strings carrying him through the warehouse windows and into the rainy night. All Might stood alone in the darkness, looking at where Japan's most powerful student had been and wondered if he'd just failed to prevent a future catastrophe. The conversation with All Might crystallized something in Izuku's mind. The symbol of peace was dying. Yes, but his philosophy would live on in whatever successor he chose. That successor would be trained to inspire, to save with a smile, to embody everything All Might represented, and they would inevitably clash with Izuku's vision for Hero Society. Perfect. Izuku began preparing for that eventual confrontation with the same methodical precision he brought to everything else. He needed to develop techniques specifically designed to counter someone who inherited One for All's overwhelming strength and speed. He needed strategies to neutralize inspiration-based heroism. He needed to be ready to prove that dominance trumped hope. The development of his ultimate technique began that night. In the privacy of U.A.'s training facilities, long after other students had retired, Izuku stood in the center of the largest arena and began experimenting. Senju Kanon was his most complex technique, 1,000 strings, all moving independently, creating a defensive and offensive network that could adapt to any situation. But it required concentration, focus, mental effort to maintain all those threads simultaneously. What if he could make it autonomous? He began with a simple test, creating a string clone using Black Knight, then seeing if he could make it operate independently. The clone formed perfectly. A duplicate made entirely of compressed strings that looked identical to Izuku, but it collapsed the moment he stopped actively controlling it. The problem is consciousness, he muttered to himself. The clone needs its own decision-making capability, its own ability to react and adapt without my constant input. He spent hours testing variations, infusing the clone with observation haki to give it predictive capabilities, coating it with armament haki to provide defensive strength, attempting to imprint fragments of his own battle instincts into the string structure. Nothing worked consistently. Then he had a different idea. What if instead of one autonomous clone, he created dozens of semi-autonomous string constructs? Not full duplicates, but specialized tools that could operate with limited independence within parameters he set. Spider's web, but evolved. Not just static threads, but active ones that could reshape themselves based on enemy movements. Parasite, but distributed. Instead of controlling one target completely, controlling multiple targets partially, giving each just enough autonomy to fight while he maintained overall strategic command. The technique began to take shape over weeks of development. He would create a battlefield of living strings, threads that could think, adapt, and respond to threats independently while he focused on overall strategy. An army of one that could fight like a coordinated force. It needed a name. Something that captured the essence of divine dominance, of heavenly authority imposing order on chaos. Heavenly demon strings, he finally decided, a technique worthy of standing alongside the greatest powers in hero society, but it wasn't ready yet. The coordination required was immense, the mental strain significant. He needed more time, more practice, more development. Good, he had time. All Might was dying, but not dead yet. His successor was being trained, but not ready yet. The League of Villains was plotting, but not moving yet. Everything was building towards something, a convergence of forces that would determine the future of hero society. And when that moment came, Izuku Midoriya would be standing at the center of it, strings wrapped around every player, ready to pull the world in whatever direction he chose. The semester continued with a tension that everyone could feel, but few could articulate. Izuku's dominance in every training exercise, every villain encounter, every evaluation, created a growing divide between him and his classmates. Some tried to bridge that gap. Midoriya-kun, Uraraka approached him after class one day, her expression determined despite obvious nervousness. A few of us are going to study together for the upcoming finals. Would you like to join? Izuku looked up from his book, a text on historical power structures and how dominant individuals shape civilizations. Why? The question threw her. Because we're classmates? Because studying together helps everyone? Does it? Izuku's smile was pleasant, but his eyes were analytical. You want to study with me specifically because my academic scores are perfect. You're hoping some of that competency will transfer through proximity. But what are you offering in exchange? That's not. Uraraka floundered. It's fine to acknowledge transactional relationships, Uraraka. Most interactions are transactional, whether people admitted it or not. Izuku closed his book. I'll join your study group. In exchange, you'll owe me a favor to be determined at a later date. That seems kind of honest? Yes. Most people hide their transactions behind social niceties and pretend they're not keeping score. I prefer clarity. His grin widened. Do we have an agreement? Uraraka hesitated, clearly uncomfortable, then nodded. Okay. Deal. The study session was revealing in ways Izuku found entertaining. His classmates struggled with concepts he'd mastered weeks ago, their studying hampered by their need to understand the emotional and moral dimensions of hero work, rather than just the tactical applications. This scenario about villain hostages, Yaoyorozu said, reading from their textbook. The recommended approach is negotiation first, force as last resort. But Midoriya, you wouldn't do that, would you? No. Izuku didn't look up from the advanced physics text he was reading simultaneously. I'd eliminate the villains immediately with precise strikes, minimizing hostage risk through overwhelming speed and force. But what if the hostages get hurt? Then I miscalculated. But statistically, hostages are more likely to die during prolonged negotiations than during swift tactical action. Villains get nervous, desperate, irrational. Better to end the situation before those factors come into play. That's so cold, Ashido murmured. That's effective, Izuku corrected. Fu. You all keep thinking about what feels right instead of what works best. Emotions make you weak. Strategy makes you strong. Not everything is about strategy, Todoroki said quietly. Sometimes people need to see heroes care. People need to see heroes win. Izuku finally looked up, his eyes intense. They need to feel safe, to know that when villains attack, heroes will protect them. Whether those heroes care emotionally is irrelevant as long as the protection is real. The philosophical divide was impossible to bridge. The study session ended with better test preparation, but deeper understanding of just how differently Izuku thought from everyone else. As students filed out, Todoroki hung back. "You said I'd owe you a favor," he said to Izuku. "What do you want?" "I haven't decided yet." Izuku's smile was unreadable. "But when I do, you'll honor the debt, won't you?" "That depends on what you ask." Fu. Fair enough. I wouldn't trust someone who agreed to anything blindly either. Izuku gathered his books. "Don't worry, Todoroki. When I call in favors, I make sure the price is something the debtor can afford to pay. I want people in my debt, not destroyed by it." After Todoroki left, Izuku remained in the empty classroom, his mind cataloging the evening's interactions. Uraraka owed him a favor. Yaoyorozu had revealed her analytical approach to problems. Todoroki had shown he'd honor agreements even when uncomfortable. Ashido had demonstrated emotional thinking patterns, all useful information. All pieces on the chessboard he was constructing. Everything was preparation. Every interaction, every conversation, every observation. All of it building toward the moment when he would need this knowledge, the moment when he would reshape hero society. And that moment was approaching faster than anyone realized. The final weeks of the semester brought unexpected news. U.A. would host a provisional license exam for students from other hero schools across the country. A massive event showcasing the next generation of heroes, with pro heroes and commission members observing to evaluate talent. More importantly, it would be Izuku's opportunity to demonstrate his dominance on a national stage against opponents who hadn't seen his capabilities firsthand. Perfect. The exam format was announced. Students would participate in simulated disaster scenarios, working to rescue civilians while facing obstacles and competing for the highest scores. Standard hero evaluation, designed to test cooperation, quick thinking, and effective quirk application. Izuku smiled when he heard the rules. They'd designed an exam that rewarded traits he possessed in abundance, while penalizing the very weaknesses he'd eliminated from his approach. This would be a massacre. The day of the exam arrived with clear skies and high tension. Students from schools across Japan gathered at the massive testing facility, sizing each other up, forming temporary alliances, preparing strategies. Izuku stood alone, his pink coat drawing stares and whispers. Everyone knew who he was now. Heavenly Yaksha, the USJ victor, the sports festival champion, the hero student who defeated both Nomu and the hero killer. Some students avoided him entirely, intimidated by his reputation. Others watched him with calculating eyes, seeing him as competition to overcome or obstacle to avoid. Only a few approached directly. A girl with silver hair and confident bearing extended her hand. "Sei Academy. I've been wanting to meet you. Your string manipulation is impressive." "Is it?" Izuku shook her hand, his observation haki immediately reading her. Strong quirk, metal manipulation, tactical thinker, looking for potential alliance. "And you are?" "Call me Mercury. I can control liquid metal. I was thinking if we work together during the exam." "No." Her smile faltered. "No, but cooperative efforts score higher in disaster scenarios. Two strong quirks working in concert would slow me down," Izuku finished. "I appreciate the strategic thinking, Mercury, but I work alone. Fu, though I'm sure you'll do well without my assistance." He walked away, leaving her standing there with a mixture of offense and intrigue on her face. The exam began with an announcement that made Izuku's grin widen impossibly far. This year's provisional license exam will feature a new element. The announcer's voice boomed across the facility. In addition to disaster scenarios, students will face simulated villain encounters. Pro heroes portraying villains will attempt to interfere with rescue operations. Successfully defeating or evading these villains while maintaining rescue efficiency will earn bonus points. The other students looked nervous. Izuku looked delighted. "Finally," he breathed. "Something interesting." The exam began, and chaos erupted immediately. Multiple disaster zones activated simultaneously. Building collapses, fires, floods, electrical hazards. Students scattered, racing to reach civilians first, competing for the highest rescue counts. Izuku didn't run. Spider's web. Strings erupted from his position, spreading across the entire facility in less than 5 seconds. Every civilian, every hazard, every obstacle, his threads touched all of them simultaneously. Then he began to work. Civilians trapped under rubble. Strings lifted debris and carried them to safety. Fires threatening rescuers. Strings created barriers and smothered flames, flooding zones endangering victims. Strings formed nets and pulled people to higher ground, electrical hazards blocking routes. Strings provided insulated pathways through the danger, all of it happening simultaneously. All of it controlled by Izuku, standing calmly in the center of his web, orchestrating rescue operations across multiple zones with the precision of a conductor leading an orchestra. The other students could only watch in shock as Izuku single-handedly rescued more civilians in 3 minutes than entire teams managed in 10. That's impossible, someone whispered. He's controlling hundreds of strings independently. How is his mind even processing all that information? Then the simulated villains appeared, and Izuku's expression transformed from focused to predatory. Pro-heroes in villain costumes emerged from hiding spots, attacking rescue operations with various quirks designed to challenge students. Most students struggled to balance rescue efforts with combat. Forced to choose between saving civilians or defending against attacks, Izuku did both without missing a beat. Bullet string. Threads shot toward the nearest villain, a hero with enhanced strength, puncturing his legs and dropping him before he could reach the civilian he'd been threatening. Parasite. Another villain, this one with a fire quirk, suddenly found his own body turning against him, walking himself away from the rescue zone and into a containment area. Overheat. A villain attempting to collapse a building with seismic attacks watched in horror as black hockey-coated strings wrapped around the structure's supports, reinforcing them against his power, while simultaneously binding his arms to prevent further attacks. Izuku fought 5 villains simultaneously while maintaining rescue operations across multiple zones, and he wasn't even breathing hard. The exam officials watched their monitors in stunned silence. "This is beyond pro-hero level," one muttered. "He's operating like an entire hero agency by himself. The score differential is absurd. No one else is even close." Izuku finished his last rescue with 3 minutes remaining in the exam. Every civilian in his assigned zones evacuated. Every hazard neutralized. Every villain defeated or captured. He'd achieved a perfect score, something that shouldn't have been possible in the time allotted. The other students were still scrambling when time expired. Final scores were displayed, and the gap was humiliating. Izuku Midoriya, 100-100. Second place, 67-100. Third place, 58-100. He'd lapped the competition so thoroughly that several students actually protested, claiming the scoring must be wrong. But the officials reviewed the footage and confirmed every rescue, every villain defeat, every point earned through legitimate performance. Izuku Midoriya had just demonstrated on a national stage that he operated on a level that made other hero students look like children. During the post-exam evaluation, a commission member approached him directly. "That was an impressive performance, Midoriya. Almost too impressive." Is there such a thing as too impressive? I thought hero work valued results. It does, but it also values teamwork, cooperation, the ability to work with others toward common goals. The man's expression was stern. "You didn't even attempt to coordinate with other students." Why would I? Coordination would have slowed me down, reduced my efficiency, and ultimately resulted in fewer civilians saved. Izuku's smile was sharp. Unless you're suggesting I should have prioritized the appearance of cooperation over actual rescue effectiveness? I'm suggesting that a hero who can't work with others is a liability, regardless of individual capability. Then it's fortunate I can work with others when necessary. I simply choose not to when it's more effective to work alone. Izuku tilted his head. Tell me, would you rather have a hero who saves 50 civilians cooperatively, or a hero who saves 200 civilians independently? The commission member's jaw tightened. The point is that you're uncomfortable with someone who doesn't need the system you've built. Someone who can operate independently, effectively, and without requiring the infrastructure you control. Izuku's voice dropped, taking on that dangerous edge. I'm not a liability. I'm a threat to your monopoly on heroism. and that terrifies you." He walked away before the man could respond, leaving the commission member standing there with a mixture of anger and fear on his face. The provisional license exam results were announced that evening. Every UA student passed. Several students from other schools also received their licenses, and Izuku Midoriya received a special commendation for exemplary performance under extreme conditions, a recognition typically reserved for second and third year students, never first years. The media coverage was explosive. Debates raged about whether Izuku's solo performance demonstrated superhuman capability or dangerous individualism. Pro-heroes weighed in with divided opinions. The public seemed split between admiring his effectiveness and fearing his methods. All of it fed into exactly what Izuku wanted: recognition, reputation, the growing understanding that Heavenly Yaksha stood apart from normal heroes. Back at UA, the first-year students gathered for a celebration that felt hollow given Izuku's dominance. "He made the rest of us look useless," Kaminari muttered. "We weren't useless," Kirishima countered, though he didn't sound convinced. "We all passed, didn't we?" "Yeah, but compared to him," Ashido trailed off. The reality was settling in for Class 1A. They weren't competing with Izuku Midoriya for top hero rankings. They were competing for second place behind someone who operated in a different category entirely. Only Bakugo refused to accept this reality. "I'm going to surpass him," the explosive blonde declared, hands crackling with power. "I'm going to get stronger, develop better techniques, and prove that I'm the best." Todoroki looked at him with something like pity. "Bakugo, he defeated 3 pro heroes simultaneously during his license exam. He's created techniques that can trap entire battlefields. He has abilities that even experienced heroes can't counter. How exactly do you plan to surpass that?" "By being better." Bakugo's voice rose. "By training harder, by never giving up." "Determination is admirable," Yaoyorozu said softly, "but there are limits to what training can overcome. Some gaps are about fundamental differences in capability, not just effort." The celebration ended early, students dispersing with the weight of reality heavy on their shoulders. Izuku wasn't at the celebration. He was in the training facility, alone, continuing to develop his ultimate technique. Heavenly Demon Strings was taking shape. The coordination was improving, the autonomous aspects becoming smoother, the overall control approaching the level he needed. It still wasn't perfect, but it was getting closer. And when it was ready, when he could deploy a battlefield of living strings that thought and adapted independently while he maintained strategic oversight, he would be truly unstoppable. All Might's successor could inherit One for All's accumulated power. The League of Villains could develop their Nomu army. The Hero Public Safety Commission could scheme and manipulate. None of it would matter when Izuku Midoriya stood at the top with absolute control. His phone buzzed. That mysterious number again. "Extraordinary performance today. You're accelerating faster than anticipated. The pieces are moving into position. Soon, you'll have to choose a side. When that moment comes, remember, the strongest survive by knowing when to fight and when to forge alliances. I'll be in touch. A friend." Izuku stared at the message, his analytical mind working through possibilities. Someone powerful was watching him. Someone with resources and intelligence capabilities that rivaled or exceeded the commission's. Someone who believed an alliance with them would benefit Izuku. Interesting. He deleted the message and returned to training, but a part of his mind was already cataloging potential allies, potential enemies, potential pieces on the chessboard that would determine Hero Society's future. Everything was building towards something. A convergence. A crisis. A moment when all the forces in play would collide, and Izuku Midoriya would be standing at the center, strings wrapped around every player, ready to pull them all in whatever direction served his vision. Heavenly Yaksha was rising, and nothing would stop his ascent to the top. The final confrontation came sooner than anyone expected. It started with an emergency alert during dinner. Villain attack on a massive scale, multiple locations across the city, coordinated assault. All available heroes mobilized immediately. And at the center of it all, the League of Villains had finally made their move. Izuku received the alert on his phone and smiled. Fu. Finally. The real entertainment begins. He didn't wait for UA's official response. He didn't coordinate with other students or follow protocol. He simply activated his provisional license, draped his pink coat over his shoulders, and left the campus through the window via string locomotion. The city was burning, literally. Fires raged across multiple districts like Nomu creatures rampaged through streets, villains ran wild, attacking civilians and heroes alike. It was organized chaos, the League of Villains demonstrating that they could strike anywhere, anytime, with overwhelming force. Izuku's observation haki expanded, reading the battlefield. Multiple Nomu signatures, at least a dozen, scattered throughout the city. Each one different, each one designed with specific capabilities to counter different hero types. The League had learned from their previous defeats and adapted good. Pro heroes engaged the Nomu across the city, fighting desperate battles against creatures that matched or exceeded their capabilities. The heroes were winning some encounters, losing others. The overall battle balanced on a knife's edge. Then Izuku arrived, and the balance shifted. The first Nomu he encountered was tearing through a residential district, its enhanced strength demolishing buildings while panicked civilians fled. 3 pro heroes were attempting to stop it, barely holding their ground. Spider's web. Strings filled the entire district in seconds, creating a 3-dimensional network that caught fleeing civilians and carried them to safety while simultaneously wrapping around the Nomu's limbs. Parasite. Izuku took control of the creature's nervous system, its rampage stopping mid-motion. The pro heroes stared in shock as the Nomu that had been demolishing them suddenly went rigid. "I have this one," Izuku said calmly. "Move to the next crisis point." "You're just a student," one hero started. "I'm the student who defeated 2 Nomu previously while you struggled with one. Move. Now. People are dying while you argue protocol." The harsh truth cut through their objections. They moved. Izuku made the Nomu walk itself to a reinforced containment truck that had just arrived, then moved to the next crisis point. District by district, Nomu by Nomu, Izuku systematically neutralized the League's assault force. Each creature was different. Each one required different techniques, but none of them could counter someone who possessed observation haki to predict their movements, armament haki to withstand their attacks, and string control precise enough to infiltrate their nervous systems. By the time he reached the 8th Nomu, his reputation had spread through the hero communication network. Heroes were deliberately directing him toward the worst threats, knowing that whatever Izuku Midoriya encountered would be defeated. Heavenly Yaksha had become the turning point in a city-wide crisis, but the real battle was still ahead. Izuku's observation haki detected it before anyone else. A massive concentration of power in the city center. Not a Nomu, something else. Something that radiated menace like others breathed air. He arrived to find All Might locked in combat with the source. A man, if he could still be called that, covered in tubes and machines that kept his destroyed body functioning. His face was hidden behind a respirator, his voice mechanical and grinding, all for one. The legendary villain who'd nearly killed All Might years ago, whose quirk allowed him to steal and stockpile powers from others, who'd built the League of Villains as part of some larger scheme, and he was winning. All Might's muscular form was flickering, his power fading faster than usual. Blood poured from multiple wounds. The symbol of peace was dying in real time. His final battle playing out before Izuku's eyes. Around them, Shigaraki directed the remaining League members, his hands scratching at his neck with manic intensity as he watched his master fight. "You're finished. All Might." All for One's voice boomed. "Your era ends here. The symbol of peace falls, and with it, the hope that sustained hero society. Watch as everything you built crumbles." He raised his hand, multiple quirks activating simultaneously. An attack that would kill All Might. Foo 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 foo. The laugh cut through the battlefield like a blade. Everyone turned to see Izuku Midoriya walking calmly toward the fight, his pink coat flowing behind him, his smile sharp and dangerous. All for One. The legendary villain, the man who broke All Might and nearly destroyed hero society. Izuku's eyes gleamed behind his sunglasses. "I've been wanting to meet you." "And who are you, child?" All for One's voice carried amusement. "Another hero come to die protecting the symbol of peace?" "I'm Izuku Midoriya, also known as Heavenly Yaksha, and I'm not here to protect All Might." He stopped, strings already extending from his fingers. "I'm here to defeat you and claim your position at the top." The audacity of the statement made even Shigaraki stop scratching. You dare. All for One started. Heavenly birdcage. Strings erupted from the ground and sky simultaneously, forming a massive cage infused with Conqueror's haki that encompassed the entire battlefield. The pressure was immense, crushing, a manifestation of Izuku's will so intense that weaker League members simply passed out from the force. All for One's expression, what could be seen behind the respirator, shifted from amusement to interest. Impressive. You have spirit, child. Power. Potential. He raised his hand again. But potential means nothing against centuries of accumulated strength. Multiple quirks fired, air pressure blasts, energy beams, physical enhancements, all layered together in an attack that should have obliterated Izuku. Armament. Full body. Izuku's entire form turned black, haki coating him completely. The attacks hit him directly, the force of impact cratering the ground beneath his feet. When the smoke cleared, Izuku stood untouched, still smiling. Is that all? How disappointing. He moved, and it was faster than anyone present had seen before. Not because his speed had increased, but because his observation haki let him predict exactly where he needed to be and when, creating the illusion of impossible velocity. God Thread! Massive haki-coated strings erupted from the ground around All for One, each one thick as a tree trunk, all moving with devastating force. The villain countered with multiple defensive quirks, creating barriers and shields that intercepted most of the strings. Most, not all. 3 threads pierced through his defenses, stabbing into his shoulders and chest. Not deep enough to kill, but enough to draw blood. All for One's eyes widened behind his mask. You actually injured me? Fufu, did you think your accumulated power made you invincible? Izuku's strings multiplied, filling the space between them. Let me educate you about the nature of dominance. It's not about how much power you have, it's about how effectively you use what you possess. The battle that followed was apocalyptic. All for One unleashed everything. Dozens of quirks working in concert, attacks from every angle, defensive measures that countered conventional strategies. Izuku responded with techniques the world had never seen. Bullet String became a machine gun barrage of haki-coated threads. Break White evolved into Break Black, 16 haki-enhanced string waves powerful enough to cut through All for One's defenses. Parasite attempted to infiltrate the villain's nervous system, countered by Regeneration, quirks that healed faster than Izuku could establish control. They fought across the city center, destroying buildings, tearing up streets, creating devastation that would take months to repair. All Might could only watch, his power completely exhausted, as his student battled the villain who'd nearly killed him. He's actually fighting All for One evenly, the symbol of peace whispered. How is that possible? Because he's a monster, Shigaraki answered, his voice carrying something between hatred and awe. We've been watching him since USJ, analyzing his capabilities, developing counters, preparing, but he keeps revealing new techniques, new powers, new applications we never anticipated. The League leader's hands scratched harder at his neck. He's everything Sensei said he'd be. The perfect villain wearing a hero's costume, someone who could reshape the world through pure dominance. Then why haven't you recruited him? All Might gasped. We tried. He refused, said he doesn't join movements, he leads them. Shigaraki's laugh was manic. He wants to stand at the top alone, controlling everything like we're all puppets on his strings. It's beautiful. It's terrifying. It's exactly what this world deserves. The battle reached its climax as Izuku deployed his ultimate technique, Heavenly Demon Strings. The battlefield transformed. Strings erupted from every surface, but these weren't normal threads. They moved with apparent consciousness, adapting to All for One's attacks independently, creating patterns that countered his quirk combinations without Izuku's direct input. It was like fighting an army where every soldier thought for itself while following a single strategic mind. All for One unleashed his most devastating attack. Every offensive quirk he possessed firing simultaneously. A blast of accumulated power that should have destroyed several city blocks. The Heavenly Demon Strings adapted in real time, weaving a defensive matrix that absorbed and redirected the attack's force. Energy scattered in every direction, but Izuku stood at the center, untouched. Impossible, All for One breathed. No single person should be able to process that much information, control that many variables simultaneously. I'm not a single person, Izuku interrupted, his voice carrying absolute confidence. I'm the future. I'm what comes after you, after All Might, after every symbol and villain who thought they stood at the top. He clenched his fist, and every string on the battlefield contracted simultaneously. And I'm ending your era right now. The heavenly demon strings wrapped around All for One from every direction, coating him in layers upon layers of hockey-enhanced threads. The villain tried to counter, tried to use his accumulated quirks to break free. But there were too many strings attacking from too many angles, adapting too quickly to his defensive measures. Parasite, Izuku's ultimate control technique, amplified by the heavenly demon strings, distributed consciousness, infiltrated All for One's nervous system through thousands of simultaneous contact points. The legendary villain's body jerked, muscles spasming as Izuku's will overwrote his own motor control. This is the difference between us, Izuku said, walking calmly toward the immobilized All for One. You collected power from others, built strength through theft and accumulation. But it's all external, all borrowed, all dependent on maintaining control over what you've stolen. He stopped directly in front of the legendary villain. My power is mine, earned through training, developed through understanding, applied through strategic brilliance. You can't steal it because it's not a quirk. It's a manifestation of will. And my will is stronger than your accumulated centuries. Izuku raised his hand, strings tightening around All for One's body. I could kill you right now, end the legendary villain's life, and claim credit for saving hero society. Everyone would praise me, call me the greatest hero of my generation. His smile turned sharp and cruel, but that would be boring, predictable, and far too merciful for someone who's caused so much suffering. He made All for One kneel, the villain's own body forced into a position of submission despite his furious attempts to resist. Instead, I'm going to make you a message, a warning to anyone who thinks they can stand above me. You're going to spend the rest of your life in prison, alive but powerless, a living example of what happens when legends meet dominance. Izuku looked up at the cameras that had captured the entire battle, broadcasting it to millions of viewers. This is Izuku Midoriya, Heavenly Yaksha, and I just defeated All for One. His voice carried across the city, across the country, across the world. Let this be a lesson to everyone watching. The old order is ending. The symbol of peace is retiring. The legendary villains are falling. A new era is beginning. His conqueror's hockey flared, the pressure so intense that even through cameras, viewers felt it. And I'm going to be the one standing at the top when everything settles. Not as a symbol, not as an inspiration, as an absolute power that no one can challenge. He released his control of All for One, letting the defeated villain collapse to the ground and turned to face the cameras directly. Villains are evil, heroes are righteous. These terms change throughout history. Those who stand at the top determine what's wrong and what's right, and I intend to stand very, very high. The broadcast ended, leaving millions of viewers in stunned silence. Izuku Midoriya had just declared war on the entire concept of hero society. And he'd done it while saving that same society from its greatest threat. The aftermath was chaos incarnate. All for One was arrested, imprisoned in Tartarus under maximum security. The League of Villains scattered, their master defeated, their plans in ruins. The captured Nomu were contained for study, and Izuku Midoriya became the most famous person in Japan overnight. The media couldn't decide whether to call him a hero or a threat. His battle with All for One was analyzed frame by frame, experts trying to understand how a first-year student had defeated a villain who'd nearly killed All Might. The Hero Public Safety Commission called for immediate meetings, hearings, evaluations. They wanted to understand, to control, to somehow contain what Izuku represented. He ignored them all. Instead, he returned to UA, walked into Class 1A, and sat in his usual seat as if nothing had happened. His classmates stared at him in silence, fear and awe mixing into an emotion none of them could name. Finally, Bakugo spoke. You fought All for One. You defeated him. I did. Izuku pulled out his textbook, opening to where they'd left off before the attack. Fufu. Though defeated might be generous, I controlled him, dominated him, made him kneel. But yes, the legendary villain is no longer a threat. How? Yaoyorozu's voice was barely a whisper. How did you get that strong? I was always this strong. I just stopped hiding it. Izuku's eyes swept across his classmates. All of you have been watching me hold back for months. Now you've seen a fraction of what I can actually do, and you're terrified. No one denied it. Good, Izuku continued. Fear is honest. Fear means you understand the power differential between us. Fear means you won't make the mistake of thinking we're peers. We're classmates, Ida protested weakly. We're supposed to support each other, work together. You're supposed to become heroes, Izuku interrupted. I'm supposed to stand at the top and remake hero society. Those are different goals requiring different approaches. Todoroki stood, his heterochromatic eyes locked on Izuku. You're saying we'll never catch up to you, that no matter how hard we train, how much we develop our quirks, we'll always be beneath you. Yes. The simple honesty of it was more devastating than any insult. But that doesn't make you useless, Izuku added, surprising them. The world needs more than one power at the top. It needs supporting structures, heroes who can handle the problems I don't have time for, people who can maintain order in my absence. His smile turned sharp. So train. Develop your abilities. Become the strongest heroes you can be. Not because you'll ever surpass me, but because when I stand at the top, I'll need capable people beneath me to maintain the new order I'm going to create. You're talking about ruling hero society. Aizawa's voice came from the doorway. Their teacher stood there, looking older than usual, exhaustion evident. That's not heroism, that's tyranny. Is it? Izuku turned to face him. Or is it just honest about what hero society has always been? All Might stood at the top and defined what heroism meant. His strength backed his philosophy. When he falls, and he will fall soon, someone else will take that position. Someone will stand at the top and redefine everything. He stood, draping his pink coat over his shoulders. It's going to be me. Not because I'm righteous or inspiring or any of the things All Might represented, but because I'm strong enough to dominate, smart enough to control, and ruthless enough to maintain order through absolute power. Izuku walked toward the door, pausing beside Aizawa. You can try to stop me, Sensei. The Commission can scheme against me. Other heroes can oppose my vision, but ultimately power decides everything, and I have more power than all of you combined. He left the classroom, his laughter echoing down the hallway. Foo, 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 foo. Aizawa stood in silence, looking at his students' shocked faces, and wondered if U.A. Sate had just trained the greatest hero in history or the greatest threat. The truth was, it didn't matter which, because Izuku Midoriya was unstoppable either way. The new era was beginning, and Heavenly Yaksha would stand at its apex, strings wrapped around the world, pulling everyone toward his vision of what society should be, whether they wanted it or not.
And now, it's time for our Patreon shout-out. For our pro-hero tier, the rising stars lighting the path of justice, Ancient Chant, and Javon McQuire. For our symbol of peace tier, huge shout-out to Sunawine631, Elijah Saunders, Ab, Peter Hamilton, Freddie Rose, Omega, Toxic Rune, Akuma Noakami, Chris Talley, Alexander Thompson, Remorsefuls, Blackvein, Nicholas Barnes, Joshua Headington, Aaron Abercrombie, Drift SK8er, Akeno Himajima, Corey Tokars, Jan, X0 Hope 3656, Devin Black, Crow, Yisbrid, Roberta Ramos de Cristina, Dasher Games, Rave on Crimson River, Dante Elaster, Adam Yunkers, Blood Saints, Donna Cafe, Zeph, Assassin24, Howie60, Ignatius, Albert, Raphael Turan, KC. And finally, for our Hope of the Universe tier, legendary thanks to Madarame, Moral, Spintown, Jaden Garrett, Greg Green, James, Kwahanyan Thompson, Juan I'm Calver, Colsey. The strings of fate have been pulled, but Heavenly Yaksha's story is far from over.
If you enjoyed watching Izuku dominate as the most feared anti-hero in My Hero Academia, smash that subscribe button and hit the bell for more what-if stories that shatter expectations. Drop a comment telling us which character should get reimagined next. Until then, stay dominant.